The immortals sat down. The heavenly hall was silent. Above the resplendent dome, a galaxy of stars was flowing. It was beautiful beyond measure. As they took their seats, the woman named Yu Yao also sat at the head of the table in the middle of the heavenly palace. Everyone took their seats. The heavenly palace was still empty and silent. Jian Wushuang looked carefully at the mysterious heavenly palace, which was built with the entire fifth heaven as its foundation. He did not know why Yu Yao had stopped them and invited them here, but he could vaguely guess that Yu Yao had an ulterior goal. Furthermore, this woman's courage was extraordinary, far from what ordinary Grand Yen immortals could compare to. Furthermore, she would not be absolute in her actions, leaving room for maneuver. One had to know that Zhang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing did not deliberately hide their auras, and their auras were not comparable to ordinary 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals. Facing these 3 terrifying 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals, Yu Yao's expression did not change. She was even as calm as before. In such a situation, Yu Yao had only 2 plans. The first was that she was betting that Jian Wushuang and the others were good people. The second was that she had something to rely on, and that something was very powerful. Jian Wushuang guessed that the second possibility was the greatest. To be able to support such a magnificent super-heavenly continent, a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortal might be exhausted. It was very likely that there were at least 2 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals following Yu Yao. In this journey to the Endless Sea, there were countless Grand Yen immortals at the initial stage, and there were also many 3 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals, but 6 and 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals were extremely rare. This showed that even though there were countless geniuses in the ancient era, 6 revolutions was the true dividing line. Once one crossed the threshold of 6 revolutions, they would have the qualifications to be called Immortal Lord. Seeing that they were all seated, Yu Yao's gaze slowly swept over them again. Finally, it stopped on Jian Wushuang, and her eyes revealed some doubt. She found it unbelievable. How could a puny little Yen immortal achieve such a dense and terrifying fate energy? Even if he was sitting side by side with a 9 Revolutions great Yen immortal, his fate energy could still resist their influence. Strange, it was too strange. Could it be that he knew a supreme secret technique to hide his cultivation realm? That must be the case. Yu Yao thought to herself and subconsciously regarded Jian Wushuang as the most dangerous existence. Seeing that they had all taken their seats, she smiled slightly and then stretched out her hand to touch the air. Immediately, the space fluctuated. Layers of ripples rippled in the space. Great suns and stars revolved in it, and the heavenly palace turned into a galaxy. Being within it, it felt extremely mysterious. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew that another Grand Yen immortal was coming. Just as he thought, as the galaxy in the heavenly hall surged, figures walked out of the ripples. Seeing this, Zhang Li, Yan Fan, Di Qing, and the others were all stunned. They had all sensed the terrifying fluctuations in the galaxy. One had to know that the only thing that could make them keep in mind was a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortal. Just as Jian Wushuang had expected, a total of 6 9 Revolutions Grand Expanse immortals stepped out of the galaxy, and boundless fate flowed out of their bodies. The 6 9 Revolutions Grand Yen immortals were all in their prime. Countless years had not left any marks on their immortal bodies. They could even return to their prime with just a thought. They were all dressed in flowing cloud uniform, which was exactly the same as Yu Yao's. Seeing them, Jian Wushuang finally understood why Yu Yao dared to stop them and expose the hinterland of the 3rd and 5th heaven. This was because she was not afraid. A total of 7 9 Revolutions Great Yen immortals was an unimaginable force, enough to cause a destructive blow to any part of the Endless Sea. The 6 9 Revolutions Grand Expanse immortals walked out of the galaxy and their eyes naturally locked onto Jian Wushuang and the others. Of course, their gazes would only fall on Zhang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing. Following that, under Yu Yao's guidance, the 6 9 Revolutions Great Yen immortals sat in front of a table on the other side of the heavenly hall, seemingly in a confrontation. Jian Wushuang did not care about this. If Yu Yao and the others had any ill intentions, they would definitely be met with the most tragic destruction. After all the higher beings had taken their seats, Yu Yao slowly stood up. Every step she took was filled with power. She smiled at Jian Wushuang and the others, then looked to the other side and said softly, "Let me introduce." Yu Yao had only finished half of her sentence when she was interrupted by a clean-looking 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal with an ethereal appearance. "There's no need for introductions. We've already heard of the names of Zhang Li and Yen Fan more than 10 years ago." As he finished speaking, the other 5 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals nodded slightly. "Oh, looks like I was too shallow," Yu Yao said indifferently. "Immortal Lord Zun Gu, can you tell me?" The 9 revolutions Great Evolution Immortal named Zun Gu smiled slightly, his gaze passing Yu Yao in the center and looking at Zhang Li and Yen Fan. "A dozen years ago, before we reached 9 revolutions, these 2 sword immortals were already famous, their names shaking millions of domains. At that time, it was said that as long as an imperial emperor obtained 2 sword immortals, he could destroy any heavenly court and establish a supreme heavenly court. Rumor has it that the 2 of them are the closest existences to the emperor. Originally, we thought that they would be able to ascend to the position of emperor under such pressure. We didn't expect that they would also be exiled here by Zhen Wuyang." At this point, Immortal Lord Zun Gu laughed self-deprecatingly. "It seems that even if we can get out, we won't be able to take revenge in our lifetime." The heavenly palace was silent. Zhang Li did not move. Yen Fan scratched his head awkwardly. He did not expect a Grand Yen Immortal to recognize him and talk about that old rumor. Jian Wushuang was not too surprised after hearing this. A sword immortal who could only practice the action of drawing a sword in a year could not be measured with ordinary common sense. After listening to the secret story of Immortal Lord Zungu, Yu Yao smiled. "In that case, it seems that the immortal array is enough to open up a passageway." Hearing this, Zungu looked at Zhang Li, Yen Fan, and then at her. "If we can have the 2 sword immortals as our guarantee, the immortal array will be activated. But I'm afraid the 2 sword immortals wouldn't agree to our request." Yu Yao did not say anything after hearing that. She walked to Jian Wushuang and the others with a gentle expression. "Immortal Lords, Yu Yao would like to ask all of you to work together to activate the Galaxia Immortal Array." Jian Wushuang looked at Zhang Li, Yen Fan, Di Qing, and the others. His divine thoughts trembled slightly. He was not the only one. Even Zhang Li and Yen Fan felt an uneasy throbbing in their hearts. The Galaxia Immortal Array was about to activate. Unknowingly, Jian Wushuang could clearly sense that this so-called Galaxia Immortal Array was definitely related to leaving the Endless Sea. Zhang Li, Yen Fan, Di Qing, and Immortal Lord Fu Yao did not speak. Instead, they all looked at Jian Wushuang. Yu Yao was even more surprised and shocked when she saw this scene. Then, she was even more certain that Jian Wushuang was not simple. After pondering for a moment, he raised his head and looked at Yu Yao. "Tell us what the Galaxia Immortal Array is." "Of course I will." She nodded without hesitation. Then, she turned around and came to the center of the entire heavenly palace. Facing the starry sky dome above her head, she raised her arms. In the next moment, the entire heavenly palace rumbled and trembled. As it trembled, the starry sky dome began to revolve. It was as if the celestial river was roaring. The boundless aura of the stars and purple energy erupted. It was the primordial purple intent. Streams of primordial purple intent fell from the celestial river like tassels, seemingly drowning the entire heavenly palace. Accompanied by the endless primordial purple intent, the celestial river that carried the giant sun and stars roared and surged. Even a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was overwhelmed by emotions. This kind of power was too shocking, and there was even a faint sense of transcendence. Every drop of primordial purple intent condensed and rose in the hall, gradually condensing into the appearance of a magnificent immortal array. However, this immortal array only existed for dozens of breaths before it shattered and disappeared. Yu Yao, who was standing in the center of the immortal array, was extremely pale. She could not even stand properly. She stood up with difficulty and looked at Jian Wushuang and the others. "Immortal Lords, what I showed you just now is the Galaxia Immortal Array. Once it is fully activated, it will be time for us to leave the Endless Sea. When they heard that the Galaxia Immortal Array was the array that opened the passage, Zhang Li, Yan Fan, and the others were shocked. Just being able to leave the endless sea was enough to make their hearts throb. However, they remained calm and waited for Jian Wushuang to speak. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang said, "Can we really use the Immortal Array to leave the endless sea?" Yu Yao said, "I can be sure that as long as the providence is sufficient, this Galaxia Immortal Array will be able to tear open the space of the endless sea. Have you tried it before?" He was unmoved and said slowly. Yu Yao slowly shook her head. "No, not even once. Ever since the Galaxia Immortal Array was created, it has only existed in our imagination until now. This is because we only have one chance to tear open the endless sea. But I can be sure that once it is completely opened, it will definitely be able to tear apart the endless sea. How can I believe you? If this is just your speculation, I'm afraid the consequences will be unbearable." Jian Wushuang looked at her and said, "Bang!" A heavy voice rang out as Immortal Lord Zun Gu slammed the table and stood up with an unfriendly expression. "Since when did a puny little Yen Immortal have the right to interrupt?" In the next moment, a snowflake sword rose without any warning and stopped in front of Zun Gu almost instantly. The tip of the sword was only an inch away from his eyes. Although it was only one sword, it was like the mountains and seas were about to collapse, causing all the Yen powers to lose their color. Cold sweat instantly flowed down from Zun Gu's temples. He was horrified to find that even though he had already reached the 9 revolutions realm, he still could not have any thoughts of resisting this sword. "Now, tell us again if he has the right to interrupt?" Yan Fan said calmly, his unconcealed killing intent bursting out. Zun Gu did not dare to say anything. He could only struggle to sit on the ground, trying to hide his fright. Jian Wushuang did not even look at him. He just looked at Yu Yao and said, "You haven't answered my question." Yu Yao came back to her senses. She began to realize that she had made a huge mistake. Jian Wushuang and the others were never good people who could be manipulated by others. A bloody battle might even break out at any time. Putting away her thoughts, she gritted her teeth and said, "That's right. This immortal array is too grand. Even if we gather the power of the 7 of us, it will be difficult to construct this immortal array. Actually, this Galaxia Immortal Array is built with 100,000 immortal yen fate as the foundation. The fate energy contained in it is something that even we can't control. Moreover, the most important point is that the location of the 3rd and 5th heaven is the weakest place in the entire endless sea. We only need to activate the Galaxia Immortal Array and attack the weakest point to tear open the endless sea." After Yu Yao finished speaking, she looked at Jian Wushuang and the others nervously. If they did not agree, she would have no choice but to let them leave. Once they left, it would be almost impossible to gather so many immortal lords. At this moment, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Yu Yao's words were highly credible. He had already guessed that the endless sea must have a weak spot. Using the power of the immortal array to blast open the weak spot would be quite feasible. If this was really the weak spot, then the gathering of 10-9 revolutions grand yen immortals and the yen power of 100,000 yen immortals would definitely be able to tear open a crack. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang's heart beat faster. If they missed this opportunity, could they leave again? Without the help of the young emperor, it was not even as feasible to use the Galaxia Immortal Array to tear open the rift if he wanted to use the golden jade ring to open the passageway. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang looked at Zhang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing. "We can try." Yan Fan used a voice transmission technique so that only they could hear it. "I've been trapped in this endless sea for too long. I have to seize the opportunity to leave." Di Qing did not say much. Jian Wushuang's decision was his decision. Next, he raised his head and looked at Yu Yao. "All right, we'll agree. However, there's one thing. Once we discover that there's something hidden, you won't be able to bear the consequences." Yu Yao secretly heaved a sigh of relief before smiling again. She said, "We've been waiting for this day for far too long. We only need to work together once, and we'll be able to leave." The simple conversation ended with Jian Wushuang agreeing to join. At this moment, All the Immortal Lords worked together to prepare to activate the Galaxia Immortal Array. The Galaxia Immortal Array, which used the life force and fate energy of 100,000 Yen Immortals as its foundation, could not be activated even with the combined power of 7-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals. Now that Zhongli and Yanfan had joined in, Di Qing and the other 2-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals had a chance to activate it. This Galaxia Immortal Array did not have an array core, but it was precisely because of this that its upper limit was even more terrifying. Jian Wushuang was certain that once the Immortal Array was activated, it would be able to tear open the endless sea and open a passage out of this place. Will there be any unexpected changes? Fuya said with a hint of worry. After experiencing this series of bloody battles, she had become much more cautious and steady. However, none of the Yen Immortals present could give her an answer. When will it start? Jian Wushuang asked. Anytime. We've been waiting for this day for countless years, Yu Yao said, her eyes filled with determination. Immortal Lord Jungu, who was threatened by Yanfan's sword, had an extremely ugly expression, but he still swallowed his pride and asked, "Have you decided on a candidate?" Yu Yao nodded and said, "The 7 of US, plus 3 more. A total of 10-9 Revolutions Great Yen Immortals should be able to completely activate the Immortal Array." No, not necessarily. I'm afraid that even if we gather the strength of the 10 of us, we still won't be able to activate the Immortal Array. Immortal Lord Jungu's expression was somewhat solemn. You have to know that this Immortal Array has 2 stages. We can control the second stage, but the first stage is probably difficult to control. Hearing this, Yu Yao fell silent. It was not that she did not know that it was better to have as many Grand Yen Immortals as possible, but 10-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals was already the limit. At this moment, Jian Wushuang asked, "There are 2 stages in the Immortal Array. What do you mean?" Yu Yao did not want to hide it either, so she said, "Actually, we weren't the ones who created this Galaxia Immortal Array. It has existed since ancient times, but it's already broken. After I found the Galaxia Immortal Array, I started to repair it. However, its broken core can't be repaired no matter what. I can only use external energy to replace it. That's why we said that this Immortal Array has 2 stages. The first stage is the problem of the core, which is a big problem. The second stage is the problem of activating it. As for the problem of activation, we can use the power of the 10 Grand Yen Immortals to activate the Immortal Array. However, I'm afraid that we won't be able to control the core of the Immortal Array and our efforts will be in vain." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang understood what she meant. He needed a living 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal who could use his own fate energy to fix the problem of the core during the first stage of the Immortal Array's operation. After a while, Jian Wushuang said softly, "Leave the first stage to me." As soon as he said this, Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing immediately denied it. How could they not know what Yu Yao meant by her words earlier? As the formation core of the first stage of the Galaxia Immortal Array, the probability of dying was almost as high as 99%. That was because it required an immense amount of fate energy to activate the Immortal Array. Once there was a problem with the first stage of the Immortal Array, then the Yen Immortal that acted as the core of the formation could be sucked dry in an instant. Di Qing's gaze turned cold almost instantly. He took a step forward and said coldly, "Are you playing with us? You want us to die?" Yu Yao was silent. She had nothing to say because if the first stage of the formation went wrong, then the Yen Immortal who acted as the core of the formation would definitely die. At this moment, the Immortal Lord Jungu snorted coldly, "Don't forget, some Yen Immortals don't even have the qualifications to die. For the first stage of the formation core, it is impossible to use a puny little Yen Immortal as the formation core. What is needed is a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal." Di Qing was furious and wanted to attack, but he was stopped by Jian Wushuang. Immortal Lord Jungu glanced at Jian Wushuang and then came to Yu Yao. "I will be the one to sacrifice for the first stage of the formation core." Even Jian Wushuang looked at him in surprise. The impression that Immortal Lord Jungu gave him was not good, could even be described as terrible. Therefore, after he said this decision, it was still unbelievable. Even Yu Yao was a little surprised. After which, she shook her head. No, Immortal Lord Zungu. You need at least 10 revolutions power to activate the Immortal Array. Once you leave, there will only be 9 left. The Immortal Lord Zungu smiled when he heard that. This Galaxia Immortal Array indeed requires the fate energy of about 10 revolutions Great Yen Immortals to activate, but it's different now. At this point, he glanced at Zhongli and Yen Fan before continuing. If it was an ordinary 9 revolutions, I would indeed need 10, but with 2 Sword Immortals joining, it would be enough to replace me. And therefore, I can be the Array Formation Core replacement of the first stage. At this point, Immortal Lord Zungu let out a long sigh. This matter has been decided. I will be the Array Core of the first stage. In the end, all the 9 revolutions Great Yen Immortals present were not indecisive people. Since the Formation Core of the first stage had been decided, it was only a matter of time before the Galaxia Immortal Array was activated. Yu Yao stood in the middle, and under the guidance of her arms, the majestic celestial river arrived once again. At this moment, Zhongli, Yen Fan, and Di Qing were already standing in the center of the heavenly hall. Other than Immortal Lord Zungu, the 9 revolutions Great Yen Immortals had already formed a circle. All of them unleashed their peak strength without holding back. This was the most shocking scene, and all kinds of extreme peaks and powers surged up. The indescribable general trend finally converged at one point, allowing the entire magnificent Immortal Array to appear. Among them, just the 2 Sword Immortals, Zhongli and Yen Fan, contributed almost half of their strength. Then there was Di Qing. As a man who did not acknowledge Emperor Zhen Wuyong at all, even if his fate energy was not as great as Zhongli and Yen Fan's, it was not much different. However, the other 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals were squeezed to the point where they were embarrassed. Jian Wushuang and Immortal Lord Fuyao, who could not contribute, stood at the outermost edge of the Galaxia Immortal Array and watched the scene closely. Immortal Lord Zungu stood behind Yu Yao, his gaze firm and decisive. He seemed to have made that decision long ago without any hesitation. Layers of primordial purple intent descended from the celestial river, reinforcing the bodies of every 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, and gradually condensed into the appearance of a grand immortal array. Billions of stars flowed within, filled with an ancient and desolate aura. After being guided by Yu Yao in the center, a total of 9 grand fate energy merged into one and finally activated the Galaxia Immortal Array. As the primordial purple intent filled the surroundings, endless multicolored light seemed to extend from the sky and enshrouded everything within. Under the illumination of the primordial purple intent and the multicolored light, Jian Wushuang felt his yen power growing at an extremely slow speed. Immortal Array activate. This immortal array, which was almost as huge as the entire vast heavenly continent, finally opened. Combining the power of fate energy of the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, the Galaxia Immortal Array that had been sealed for countless years was completely activated. The heavenly palace shattered into pieces, turning into powder and disappearing. A resplendent pillar of light with endless primordial purple intent shot into the sky, illuminating the dark sky. At this moment, all the Grand Yen Immortals in the 3rd and 5th heavens stopped cultivating. They stood in the void and looked at the huge array with burning eyes. Their hearts were surging. The Galaxia Immortal Array was activated, and the extreme darkness of chaos was emptied. The surrounding sky was dyed by the primordial purple intent. Wisps of purple tassels fell down, illuminating everything. Jian Wushuang, who was standing at the periphery of the Immortal Array, looked at the scene solemnly. He was finally convinced that Yu Yao's words were true. Once the Galaxia Immortal Array, which gathered 10 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals and 100,000 Yen Immortals, was activated, a crack would definitely be torn open in the endless sea. In the center of the Immortal Array, Yu Yao held her hands high and made a gesture of opening the sky. 9 streaks of fate energy from the 9 revolutions 9 great immortals transformed into a pillar of light. Under her guidance, it was blasted onto the Galaxia Immortal Array's array core. Buzz. Waves of ancient voices resounded throughout the world. The Galaxia Immortal Array, which had been silent for countless years, was completely activated at this moment. The endless primordial purple intent stopped falling and stopped in the void. It began to rapidly construct flowing purple patterns. When all the primordial purple intent transformed into dense purple patterns, the Galaxia Immortal Array was formed. It was so large that it used the entire fifth heaven as its foundation. The 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals were acting as the corners of the formation, each acting as one of the formation cores, with the array formation operating in the center. Their fate energy made the Galaxia Immortal Array start to circulate. Looking at the magnificent Immortal Array, Jian Wushuang sharply noticed that although there seemed to be only 9 formation cores, there was another formation core behind Yu Yao. However, the formation core was sealed and had not been activated yet. Immortal Lord Zungu stood in the position of that formation core. Immortal Lords, please release all your fate energy, Yu Yao called out loudly. She was already at her limits from supporting such a grand immortal array all by herself. Whether we can leave or not depends on this one move. Jiang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing looked at each other. Then both of them released their great fate energy. Just the 3 of them alone released a vast amount of fate energy, pushing the Galaxia Immortal Array to its peak. Other than Yu Yao, the remaining 5-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals did not hesitate and sent out their most majestic fate energy. 9 Revolutions Great Yen Immortals were the peak. The fate energy of a heavenly region plane could not even come close to theirs. They were supreme experts and terrifying existences that could sense the fate energy of emperors. Thus, at this moment, when the 8-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals' heavenly fate energy formed into one, the Galaxia Immortal Array was activated. Billions of purple light condensed into purple patterns and circulated. The huge and magnificent pillar of light completely lit up the entire sky. Immortal Lord Zungu stood on the silent array core behind Yu Yao and watched this scene nervously. His heart was beating like a drum. He had been waiting for this day for too long, so long that he was almost in despair. But now there was hope for everything. Nothing could go wrong. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, who was standing at the outermost area, was also solemn. This was the only time they could leave the endless sea. The world had changed. The fate energy of the Grand Yen Immortals was too terrifying and grand. It allowed the entire Galaxia Immortal Array to activate. It was like a sealed heavenly gate that shot out billions of multicolored lights. Led by Yu Yao, the luck of the 9-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals worked together to attack the sealed gate above the Immortal Array. Buzz! A heavy buzz erupted between heaven and earth again. All the spectating Grand Yen Immortals were forced back by this fluctuation. Even Jian Wushuang, who was trying to keep his mind calm, was shaken by the fluctuation. However, even this kind of power was unable to break open the sealed gate above the Immortal Array. Yu Yao grunted as a stream of divine blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Sensing this change, Immortal Lord Zungu was shocked. He sensed that something was wrong and hurriedly prepared to help. Zungu, don't move, Yu Yao shouted. She raised arms once again, released endless power. The two collided, and the gate exploded with a deep rumble. It was no longer as unbreakable as before. Immortal Lord Zungu could only stand back at the original array core and continue to watch the scene nervously. This stalemate lasted for a long time. They had gathered 9-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals and 100,000 Yen Immortals for this, and it reached the extreme. The purple light of the primordial purple intent almost formed a mist. In the sky, fine cracks began to appear on the sealed gate. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang was secretly nervous. Once the sealed gate was broken, the endless sea would be opened. Immortal Lord Zungu was even more excited. He almost went to the center of the array formation to add some strength. The situation had reached this stage, and the Galaxia Immortal Array had successfully activated. There was no problem with the core of the first formation core. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before he broke through the sealed gate. The 9-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, led by Jiang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing, continuously provided fate energy to strengthen the Immortal Array, trying to break through the gate above their heads. The gate was unstoppable, but cracks started to appear. Yu Yao had 8 streaks of supreme fate energy and had almost fused with the Galaxia Immortal array. She emitted a brilliant power that could not be looked at directly. However, in the next moment, the Galaxia Immortal array that was continuously gathering fate energy to attack the gate suddenly stopped. The enormous primordial purple intent light pillar also stopped abruptly and then dimmed. In the center of the Immortal array, Yu Yao suddenly spat out 7-colored divine blood. Her fate energy was flowing away at an unimaginable speed. This change had happened too quickly, to the point that by the time all the Grand Yen Immortals reacted, they were already unable to reverse it. The Immortal array shook violently, and all the flowing purple patterns began to dim, and the fate energy reversed and actually flowed into the Immortal array. Then, the first formation core, which had been sealed for a long time, quietly opened at this moment. Immortal Lord Zungu stood on the spot. The joy in his eyes had not even subsided. Instead, it was replaced by shock and despair. The thing he was most worried about finally happened. The formation core of the first stage of the Galaxia Immortal array was damaged. In the end, it could not withstand such a degree of fate energy and began to repair itself. The fate energy released by the 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals was swallowed by the Galaxia Immortal array at that moment and flowed into the first formation core continuously. Looking at the array core that had already been activated, Immortal Lord Zungu did not run or react excessively. He just stood quietly on the spot. A few breaths later, a long sigh sounded and swept across the hearts of all the Grand Yen Immortals present. Then he smiled. His usually stern face became much gentler at this moment. Immortal Lords Yaoer, I'll go first and offer the last of my fate energy to you. His voice was like a long wind that spread across the sky. Then his voice faded away, as if was then swallowed by the silent sea. Immortal Lord Zungu stepped into the array core alone. The formation core that was like a vortex that devoured all fate energy was too terrifying. Even a 6 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal would die almost instantly if they stepped into it. 9 revolutions could resonate with everything, and even they could not withstand this. There was only one outcome for Immortal Lord Zungu, and that was that his fate energy would be completely destroyed, and there was no possibility of him surviving. At this moment, Jian Wushuang felt respect for him. No, Zungu, don't! Yu Yao shouted, her eyes filled with grief. However, she could not move a single step. If she did, the Galaxia Immortal formation would disintegrate even faster. Immortal Lord Zungu laughed loudly. From the moment he stepped into the whirlpool-like formation core, the fate energy around him could not be reversed and disappeared. His flying cloud robe shattered, and his immortal body rapidly aged. The role of Immortal Lord Zungu was to block the array core of the Immortal array by himself and offer up his own fate energy, allowing the array core to absorb it. This was to maintain the operation of the entire Galaxia Immortal array. His immortal body instantly aged and shattered. Following that, primordial secret marks appeared in the shape of chains, firmly binding him in the array core. His fate energy was devoured. Immortal Lord Zungu's eyes were filled with relief. He allowed the chains to continuously devour the fate energy before wantonly releasing all the fate energy in his immortal body. A 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal trying his best to release his own fate was extremely terrifying. The boundless and surging fate energy completely sealed the swirling formation core. As the array core was completely sealed, the fate energy in the Galaxia Immortal array stabilized and condensed again. Yaoer, open the heavenly gate. Immortal Lord Zungu used all his strength to utter a final sentence. Yu Yao was in a daze, but she knew that she could not let his efforts go to waste. She could only control her fate energy and continue to charge toward the heavenly gate. The rest of the 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals had gloomy expressions. They had known each other for a long time. Their old friends had died. They could not help but feel sad. Yen Fan exhaled a mouthful of turbid breath and nodded slightly at Immortal Lord Zungu. Using the life force and fate energy of a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal as the core of the formation, the Galaxia Immortal array stabilized once again. At this moment, The primordial light pillar that gathered the fate energy of the 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals attacked the sealed heavenly gate once again. A roar that seemed to come from the ancient nether erupted. The fully activated Galaxia Immortal Array released a primordial light pillar that completely covered the entire sky. Everything was filled with an indescribable ancient power. The Grand Yen Immortals outside the formation were no match for this terrifying shockwave. They were all sent flying 1,000,000 feet away. Those with weaker cultivation levels were shaken until divine blood flowed out of their mouths and ears. Those with weaker divine sense would be in extreme pain under such an impact. Even Fu Yao could not stand properly. Jian Wushuang was not feeling well either, but he was not affected too much. He stretched out his hand and covered Fu Yao with his divine sense before looking nervously at the scene in front of him. The impact was so intense that it was almost as terrifying as the battle with Emperor-to-be Black Cloud. The sky was replaced by the primordial purple intent. The endless sea stirred up tens of thousands of dust waves and then quickly evaporated. In the sky, the sealed heavenly gate was covered in cracks, almost to the point of being completely shattered. Jian Wushuang raised his head and stared at the scene nervously. However, he immediately sensed that something was wrong, because he saw that although the heavenly gate was already shattered to the extreme, there were no signs of destruction at all. Moreover, at the edge of the heavenly gate, it actually began to slowly repair itself. This was a bad omen. The heavenly gate was actually slowly repairing itself. Once they were exhausted, everything would be for naught. Receiving 8 streaks of supreme fate energy, Yu Yao crazily charged at the heaven gate. At this moment, Immortal Lord Zungu could not hold on anymore. He was standing in the swirling array core, and his immortal body was completely shattered. The 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal's fate energy was completely devoured by the array core. Immortal Lord Zungu had been annihilated. With his death, the Galaxia Immortal Array collapsed. The endless fate energy no longer charged at the sealed gate. Instead, it reversed and was devoured and absorbed by the first array core. The Immortal Array collapsed, and everything was about to go to waste. At this moment, all the Grand Yen Immortals present were in despair. They had waited for countless years, but this was the result. Did we fail? Immortal Lord Fu Yao murmured softly, and there was only bitterness in her eyes. Even with the combined power of 10-9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, they could not open the heavenly gate. Everything was already settled. Looking at the chaotic fate energy in the Galaxia Immortal Array, Jian Wushuang knew that they had failed. In the next moment, something happened. An initial stage Grand Yen Immortal released endless fate energy without any warning and flew into the Immortal Array. Then, under the gaze of all the Grand Yen Immortals, he released his immortal source and scattered his great fate energy into the swirling array core. His great fate energy sealed the array core for a few breaths of time before it was completely devoured. This scene was seen by all the Grand Yen Immortals present. There was only determination left in their eyes. The next moment, the second Grand Yen Immortal flew out and entered the vortex without hesitation. He used his immortal source and fate energy to seal the array core. Following the appearance of the second person, the third and fourth Grand Yen Immortals flew into the Immortal Array. They did not hesitate and directly used their own immortal sources to seal the formation core. Even though their fate energy could not compare to that of a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, they still charged forward without hesitation, trying to hold on for a few breaths of time. Flying into the array core was like a moth flying into a flame. This scene was tragic and lonely. Not a single 9 Revolutions Great Evolution Immortal persuaded them to do it. They all voluntarily offered their immortal source and fate energy. It was also because they did it without hesitation that it added to the solemnity and loneliness. At this moment, even the life of a Grand Yen Immortal was like an ant. However, they were already supreme existences who had reached the peak and could build the heavenly Tao with a wave of their hands. In the third and fifth heaven, all the Grand Yen Immortals moved. They silently and spontaneously destroyed themselves, just to buy 10 breaths, or even a few breaths of time. They threw themselves into the Immortal Array, and their lives were forfeit. The 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals in the Immortal Array could no longer bear to see this scene. They all turned their faces away. Yu Yao, who was standing in the center of the Immortal Array, was already crying. They were once supreme mighty figures, but they died like ants. This shocking scene was carved deeply in Jian Wushuang's heart, and from then on, it was hard to forget. Nearly 1,000 Grand Yen Immortals had died in the core of the Immortal Array just to fight for a little more time. They were from the same era as Jin Wuyang, and they had survived from the ancient era where time was meaningless. However, they were all imprisoned by Jin Wuyang and exiled here. In the end, they did not have a good ending and died like dust. It was only at this moment that Jian Wushuang realized that although the endless sea might not be cruel to him, it was truly an endless cage for the Grand Yen Immortals who were exiled here. The endless lifespan made the Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals feel like they were living in a distorted immortal world, living in misery. Jian Wushuang suddenly felt that the vast and boundless great Yen domain was like a boundless ocean. Even the great cosmos he traversed and the divine power universe were like a boundless ocean. He had walked, step by step, breaking free from the shackles and becoming stronger. Even the Emperor's fate energy began to favor him. However, there was still no end to it. No matter how far he'd come, there was no end in sight. This endless cage seemed to be something that even 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals could not break. His divine sense was already completely integrated. At this moment he thought about many things. Since even a 9 Revolutions Great Yen Immortal could not break it, then what about an emperor? His eyes lit up, but he suddenly realized something and subconsciously looked at Yu Yao. Yu Yao, who was originally crying in grief, was now expressionless. She began to control the 8 streaks of 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal's supreme fate energy again. As for Zhongli, Yanfan, Di Qing, and the other 5 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, they released all their fate energy. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He did not dare to imagine, but he could not calm down. Yu Yao's thoughts actually matched his thinking. No, stop quickly. Don't release any more fate energy. Jian Wushuang shouted to Zhongli and Yanfan. However, they were unable to hear the sound outside the Immortal Array and completely released all their fate energy. Yu Yao, who was in the center of the Immortal Array, seemed to have sensed something. She looked at Jian Wushuang with only coldness in her eyes. Then, she retracted her gaze and raised her arms. She gathered the fate energy of the 8 strongest 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals and no longer struck the broken heavenly gate. Instead, she absorbed all of them. Di Qing was the first to react. He had already sensed that something was wrong, but it was already too late. He wanted to withdraw, but he realized that he could not take back his fate energy. At the same time, Zhang Li and Yan Hui also noticed the changes. When they saw Yu Yao absorb all their fate energy, their expressions turned extremely ugly. They had never thought that Yu Yao would devour their energy at this moment to strengthen herself instead of destroying the gate. The remaining 5 9 Revolutions Grand Expanse Immortals also noticed the change. They looked at Yu Yao in disbelief. They also did not expect Yu Yao to do this, absorbing their fate energy to strengthen herself. However, it was already too late. They could not withdraw at all. They could not even withdraw their own fate energy. You're courting death, Yan Fan shouted. Look at these Grand Yen Immortals who died. Are they going to be buried with you? Yu Yao did not speak. Boundless fate energy began to surge into her body, and the fate of the entire Galaxia Immortal Array was at her fingertips. Jian Wushuang could no longer sit back and watch. He condensed an invisible sword and flew forward, slashing down heavily. The invisible sword tore through the void and smashed heavily on the Galaxia Immortal Array. However, this Immortal Array had gathered hundreds of thousands of Yen Immortals and the fate energy of 9 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals. It was already at its peak and could not be broken through by external forces. Even if Jian Wushuang released the Wushuang Sword Deu, he could not break through. Wushuang, leave quickly. At this moment, Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing shouted loudly, telling him to leave as soon as possible. However, Jian Wushuang would never retreat because the people who were most important to him were all in the Immortal Array. Just as he was about to activate his strongest sword strike, to resist the Galaxia Immortal array. An unimaginable power surged from Yu Yao's body. All the Grand Yen Immortals were terrified, including Zhang Li and Yen Fan. Their eyes were extremely solemn. Now that things had come to this, they finally understood why Yu Yao had set up this situation. She wanted to use 100,000 Immortals and 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals as a guide to create her own Emperor's Fate energy. This was too unimaginable, to the point that none of the Grand Yen Immortals had thought of this. But it had already happened. A primordial purple aura slowly flowed from Yu Yao's immortal body. That was the fate of an imperial emperor. Jian Wushuang retreated slowly. He finally understood that Yu Yao's intention was not to tear the endless sea apart, but to satisfy herself and pursue the supreme heavenly Tao. At this moment, Yu Yao had condensed the Emperor's fate energy. This was too terrifying. Once she had Emperor's fate energy, it meant that she had completely stepped out of the 9 revolutions and reached the Emperor-to-be realm. Jian Wushuang and the others had already experienced how terrifying an Emperor-to-be was in the previous battle. The Emperor-to-be Black Cloud was able to destroy everything with ease. He even defeated Zhang Li and Yen Fan with a flip of his hand. This was too terrifying. If Jian Wushuang had not borrowed Emperor Jin Wu's Emperor Fate energy, they would have all perished. And now, Yu Yao had used the Galaxia Immortal array to absorb the power of 100,000 Yen Immortals and 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, allowing her to comprehend the Emperor's fate energy. Once the Emperor's fate energy was condensed, she would become an Emperor-to-be. Once he became an Emperor-to-be, it would be difficult for them to reverse the situation. Yu Yao raised her hands. An endless primordial purple intent began to flow out of her body. The entire Galaxia Immortal array lost its power and became dim. Boundless primordial purple intent was added to her body. As for the 9 revolutions great Yen Immortals, other than Zhang Li, Yen Fan, and Di Qing, the other 5 had their immortal sources shattered and their fate energy absorbed. Even in death, they had never said a single word about Yu Yao. Just as Zhang Li, Yen Fan, and Di Qing could not hold on any longer, the Galaxia Immortal array quietly shattered. Covered in blood, Jian Wushuang cut a hole in the formation and shattered it. When the Immortal array shattered, they felt the shackles around them suddenly loosen. They almost did not think about it and escaped from the Immortal array. "Where are you guys going?" A quiet and emotionless voice resounded throughout the wilderness. Jian Wushuang's body stiffened slightly. Then, without any hesitation, he pushed Zhang Li, Yen Fan, Di Qing, and Immortal Lord Fu Yao away. An extremely cold aura condensed behind him. Streams of primordial purple intent in the void wrapped around him like sharp vines. At that moment, Yu Yao, who had absorbed the power of the Galaxia Immortal array, appeared behind Jian Wushuang. She was filled with the Emperor's fate energy. Her eyes had been replaced by purple, and her immortal body was burning with magnificent purple flames. Lines of secret runes that suppressed the void slowly flowed. They were the materialization of an Emperor's fate energy. The void shattered, causing endless strange phenomena to play out. The Grand Yen Immortals at the 3rd and 5th heaven were all dead. They were all buried in the array core, not a single one was left behind. Even the entire 3rd and 5th heaven no longer existed, replaced by endless primordial purple intent. Yu Yao was the emperor who ascended the throne. The power provided by the Galaxia Immortal array that condensed the fate energy of more than 100,000 Yen Immortals and 99 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals pushed her towards the Emperor-to-be realm. The boundless primordial purple intent was the Emperor's fate energy, and it belonged to Yu Yao now. Jian Wushuang's heart pounded as he felt the terrifying purple aura flame. With his intuition, he could feel that Yu Yao's fate energy was even stronger than the Emperor-to-be Black Cloud. This also meant that as long as she wanted to make a move, no Yen Immortal could survive. This moment was the most terrifying moment between life and death. Zhang Li, Yen Fan, and Di Qing's fate energy had already been sucked dry in the Galaxia Immortal array, and they had almost no strength to resist. One had to know that luck was not the same as the ability to regenerate. Fate energy was like an immortal source, it was the foundation of the Yen Immortal. Once it was damaged, it would take a long time to repair it. Even if Jian Wushuang had emperor-grade pills, it was impossible for him to recover Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing in a short time. At this moment, there were only 5 of them left in the ruins of the 3rd and 5th heaven. Other than that, all the other Yen Immortals and even the 9 Revolution Grand Yen Immortals became the sacrificial victims of Yu Yao, paving her way to becoming an emperor. Yu Yao only glanced at them once before looking away, as if she was not worried that they would escape. She looked at her palm that was surrounded by the primordial purple intent, and there was only joy and infatuation in her eyes. So, this is the fate energy of an emperor. As Yu Yao's voice fell, billions of primordial purple light seeped out of her immortal body and began to outline some kind of power that could not be seen directly. The flying cloud robe was replaced by an emperor's clothes condensed from primordial purple intent. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows twitched. He had been hoping for a stroke of luck that Yu Yao had failed to become an emperor-to-be. But now, the moment the emperor's clothing was condensed, everything had already been settled. Yu Yao was undoubtedly an emperor-to-be. Do you think you can escape? Dressed in a dark purple thousand-leaves emperor robe, her eyes were cold as if she was looking at an ant. We have already given you all our fate energy, and you already took from everyone else in the continent. You have gotten the result you wanted. Why do you have to kill us? Jian Wushuang shielded them behind him and said softly, Is this the result I want? Yu Yao slowly raised her arms and the corners of her mouth curved upwards. No, the final result I want is to become an emperor. Jian Wushuang suppressed his anger and looked at her coldly. Yu Yao was a completely different person from before, and her actions were even worse than the emperor-to-be Black Cloud in the City of Exile. She coveted all the Grand Yen Immortals, even the 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortals. Everything was designed to kill them, only to devour their fate energy, to make herself become an emperor-to-be. Now, Jian Wushuang no longer hoped that the completely inhuman emperor-to-be Yu Yao would let them go. All of our fate energy now belong to you. Even if you kill us all, we won't be able to provide any more fate energy. Jian Wushuang tried a last-ditch effort. Immediately after, Yu Yao's emotionless eyes slowly swept past them. In the end, her gaze fell on him. Your fate energy doesn't belong to me. Jian Wushuang was stunned. Then he looked at her and said, Okay, I'll give you my fate energy and you can let them go. Do you think you have the right to negotiate? Emperor-to-be Yu Yao smiled contemptuously. However, they are no longer of any value to me, so they can leave. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh of relief. No, Wushuang, you can't stay. Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing said anxiously at the same time. They knew very well that she had killed all the Grand Yen Immortals under her in order to obtain the Emperor's fate energy. If Jian Wushuang stayed, he would be completely destroyed. Jian Wushuang turned around and winked at them. He said in a special voice that only they could hear, Leave without worry. I have my own way to keep up with you. Don't forget that I still have a trump card that I haven't used. Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing calmed down. During the battle with Black Cloud, Jian Wushuang used his own power to wipe him out. Although this was too unimaginable, it had actually happened. Therefore, although they were a little worried when they saw Jian Wushuang's confident expression, they had no better way. Their fate energy had been drained by the Xianxia Immortal Array and their strength had declined to the extreme. Even if they stayed, they would only be a burden to Jian Wushuang. Then you must be careful, Di Qing said nervously. Jian Wushuang nodded and turned around after watching the 4 of them leave. As expected, Yu Yao did not go back on her words. After they left, she looked at him. I'm a little curious. Why absorb the fate energy of a puny little Yen Immortal? Jian Wushuang looked at her and asked. Yu Yao looked at him and said expressionlessly, Because I won't let any of the Yen Immortals here leave alive. Jian Wushuang's eyes widened as a sense of crisis suddenly surged in his heart. As if to confirm his thoughts, Yu Yao suddenly raised her arms. As she raised her arms, endless primordial purple intent quietly covered the entire sky. Each strand of primordial purple intent became extremely sharp and rained down like an endless rain of arrows. Looking at the unimaginable rain, Jian Wushuang swallowed. He lowered his eyes and released millions of sword intents. Facing the endless primordial purple intent, he resolutely attacked alone. At this moment, the Wushuang sword Dao collided with the Emperor-to-be fate energy once again. The second move of the Wushuang sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea Sword intent. The river, the majestic celestial river, descended from the sky, like the mountains and seas were about to collapse, roaring and sweeping forward. Jian Wushuang sat at the head of the sword river and squinted his eyes. He knew that, without a doubt, he would lose. In order to allow Jiang Li and Di Qing to leave, Jian Wushuang prepared to use all his fate energy in his immortal body to survive. The roaring celestial river collided with the endless primordial purple intent. There was no earth-shaking explosion, only devouring and absorption. The primordial purple intent that could break through all things easily tore apart the celestial river and swallowed all the sword intents. Facing an emperor-to-be, everything was powerless. Even a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal could not fight an emperor-to-be, let alone a mere Yen Immortal. The Sword Dao Celestial River only existed for a few breaths of time before it was completely devoured. Everything was covered by the purple light again. Yu Yao remained standing in her original position, her face calm and composed. The purple flames on her 1,000 leaves emperor robe burned even more vigorously. Behind her, one could see a tattered immortal body, almost crushed into pieces and barely held on from falling to the ground. 7-colored divine blood poured out of his immortal body, dyeing the primordial purple sky with a demonic scarlet color. Mystic garb of the 9 heavens, which was still emitting a sky blue intent, dimmed slightly at this moment, but it was not damaged at all. Even his chest was perfectly preserved under the protection of the mystic garb of the 9 heavens. However, apart from the parts protected by the mystic garb of the 9 heavens, the rest of his immortal body was almost shattered into meat paste. His divine blood was drained. Jian Wushuang felt that all the power in his body was leaving, but he was still fighting. He used all his strength to bite open the emperor-grade pill hidden in his mouth. In an instant, the light retracted and the energy that had been drained returned. Even his immortal body recovered quickly. Slowly turning around, Yu Yao's calm eyes revealed a trace of surprise. A mere Yen Immortal had actually withstood her emperor-to-be fate energy? In an instant, his immortal body had almost recovered. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at her solemnly. "My guess was right, you really aren't an ordinary Yen Immortal," Yu Yao said meaningfully. "That clothing you're wearing, I can't see through it." Jian Wushuang ignored her words and sneered. "Don't you think you are shameless by not letting the living Yen Immortals leave? Afraid that what you did would spread? You don't want to be despised by all the Yen Immortals in the world." Yu Yao's eyes narrowed, and her expression finally changed. "You're courting death. I am indeed courting death, but you are not worthy of killing me." When those thousands of grand Yen Immortals blocked the formation core with their bodies, sacrificing themselves without hesitation. Even the 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortals sacrificed their fate. Meanwhile, all you have are dirty thoughts. So what if you have the emperor-to-be fate energy? You're just a clown. At this moment, Jian Wushuang cursed wantonly with extreme disdain. It was as if she had been stabbed in her most painful spot, and Yu Yao could no longer remain calm. Just like before, she attacked directly and ruthlessly. Endless primordial purple intent poured out from her palm and shot forward. This was the fate energy of an emperor, the genuine fate energy of an emperor. Looking at the rising momentum, Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed a touch of bitterness. Without the help of an emperor's fate energy, it was impossible to fight against her. Even someone as graceful as Zhang Li and Yan Fan could only be suppressed. However, he was still not afraid. At this moment, he was carrying 3 Daos: the Dao of Protection, the Dao of Slaughter, and the Wushuang Sword Dao were reinforced once again. Selfless True Shadow also appeared behind him. He put his palms together and slowly opened his true eyes, revealing deep compassion. Boundless fate energy that was as deep as hell completely bloomed, and it was actually comparable to the Emperor's fate energy. Yu Yao was shocked. The luck that Jian Wushuang released was so shocking that she could not ignore it. But he was clearly just a Yen immortal. Due to the lack of cultivation, cracks started to appear on his immortal body when he unleashed all three Daos. This was already Jian Wushuang's limit. If it was not for the support of selfless true shadow, he would have exploded from the fate energy of the three Daos. The shock in Yu Yao's eyes disappeared, replaced by a greedy look. Even though she was already an emperor-to-be, she was still far from reaching that level of a true emperor. At this moment, the fate energy on Jian Wushuang's body made her extremely tempted. He laughed loudly. With three supreme fate energies, he controlled the huge selfless true shadow behind him to brazenly attack the primordial purple fate energy. Yu Yao smiled meaningfully and pointed her finger. Instantly, billions of primordial purple intent condensed into one point and shot toward Jian Wushuang with an unstoppable force. At this moment, the selfless true shadow, which was over 1 billion feet tall, pressed forward. But he was facing Yu Yao, an emperor-to-be. The selfless true shadow's attack could not even land. It was directly shattered into countless pieces by the demonic primordial purple intent. Then, it did not slow down and pointed at Jian Wushuang's chest. All of this happened too quickly, so much so that he did not even have time to react before his body was penetrated. A pain that came from the depths of his divine sense made him unable to withstand it for a moment. He directly knelt down. At the position of his heart, the only tear in the mystic garb of the 9 heavens appeared, swaying with a hint of purple. The primordial purple intent was like maggots in his bones, completely burning in his immortal body. This kind of burning was enough to burn even one's divine sense. This was also the moment when Jian Wushuang faced death. The unique heaven-defying characteristic of the undying and imperishable immortal body allowed him to revive even if his immortal body was completely shattered. However, this was under the premise that a portion of his divine sense was retained. If his divine sense was destroyed, there was no way Jian Wushuang could be resurrected. Right now, his divine sense was burning. Yu Yao had seen through the fatal crack on his mystic garb of the 9 heavens, so she controlled the primordial purple intent to enter his body and devour him from the inside. Jian Wushuang knelt in the void. His immortal body had a strange dark purple color. Every meridian was burning and then turned into ashes. Yu Yao had also quietly arrived in front of him. She then clenched her fist and lifted his entire body. "You're not bad. I can't see through you," she said softly. Other than coveting, there was also a hint of unexplainable meaning in her eyes. Jian Wushuang could no longer speak. The purple flame was burning his immortal body, meridians, and divine sense crazily. True death was inevitable. Only when all of you truly die can my fate and divine sense truly fuse and properly take that step. This is why I want to kill all of you. Yu Yao's voice was filled with heavy dignity. In addition, I will make good use of your fate energy. The purple flame had burned Jian Wushuang's eyes to ashes and his immortal body was rapidly withering. Once his divine sense was destroyed, he would never be able to resurrect. Yu Yao did not say anything else. In a breath, the 3 traces of fate energy on Jian Wushuang's back surged out. The golden light of the Tao of protection, the scarlet light of the Tao of slaughter, and the formless light of the Wushuang sword Tao. These 3 great traces of fate energy had been taken away and flowed in the void without a master. Looking at the surging fate energy in front of her, Yu Yao could not hold it in any longer. She opened her mouth slightly, and the 3 great traces of fate energy were swallowed into her stomach. Even 39 revolutions grand Yen immortals would not be able to condense such a vast amount of fate energy. This was because these 3 strands of fate energy had already surpassed the boundaries of the immortal Yen realm and reached an unknown realm. And now it had been devoured by Yu Yao. In an instant, the purple flames on her body became even more vigorous, and the patterns on her imperial robe became even more vivid. It was as if she could awaken a new power at any time. Jian Wushuang, who had lost the blessing of energy and his divine sense was burned, was no longer breathing. His immortal body was shattered to the extreme. Yu Yao was very satisfied with the 3 supreme traces of fate energy. She glanced at his immortal body, and there was no more aura, and she did not attack him again. Instead, she used a beam of yen energy to gently lift him up and casually placed him in the void. The primordial purple intent circulated quietly and completely covered Jian Wushuang's immortal body. The loss of 3 supreme fate energy meant that his Tao was dead. Since his Tao was dead, his divine sense would naturally disappear as well. This was also the reason why Yu Yao did not destroy his immortal body. Now that Jian Wushuang was dead, she had more important things to do. She had to capture the 4 grand yen immortals who had escaped and kill all of them. After Yu Yao left, she did not notice that the chest of the immortal body that was lying in the void was heaving. Damned little fellow, what kind of trouble have you provoked this time? Do you know that if it weren't for this emperor's help, you would have been completely gone? The voice was laced with anger, and it rang in his ears. It woke Jian Wushuang up from his dead state. He suddenly sat up straight and panted heavily. At the same time, the pain that came from the depths of his divine soul and divine sense made him unable to help but groan in pain. This is actually still alive. Wasn't my divine sense completely burnt? Jian Wushuang muttered to himself in disbelief. At the same time, he looked ahead subconsciously. At this moment, he was sitting on a boundless red desert. In this red desert, less than a few feet away from him, a huge chi bird that was like a flowing cloud was staring at him with its huge eyes. As their eyes met, Jian Wushuang subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then, he pushed his arms against the sand and moved his butt backward. This bird was too huge, and it was also too strange and mysterious. It had 6 horns on its head, and each horn was a different color. It was beautiful and mysterious. Its entire body seemed to be shrouded in clouds, making it impossible to see clearly. The huge pupil was pure gold, as if it contained thousands of suns, making it impossible for people to look directly at it. Perhaps others did not know what this huge and terrifying bird was, but Jian Wushuang knew it very well. Only Emperor Luya could have such a phenomenon and monopolize a part of his divine sense. Strictly speaking, this bird was not Emperor Luya because the last strand of his divine sense had already dissipated. This bird was actually a manifestation of Emperor Lu Ya's divine sense that he had left behind. It possessed the will of Emperor Luya, but it was not Emperor Luya. Looking at the furious bird, Jian Wushuang's eyes twitched. Listen to my explanation. I didn't mean to die, but trouble came to me. The bird was like an emperor that had descended, its golden eyes carrying an imposing aura that could not be looked at directly. If I hadn't protected your divine sense, you would have been destroyed long ago. I can feel that the power that burned your divine sense was not something you could resist. Although I was able to protect your divine sense for a while, it also consumed a lot of my emperor source. You have to remember, if you continue to be so reckless, I might not be able to withstand it and break apart, and you won't be able to obtain the entire Luya Heavenly Emperor runes. Jian Wushuang's eyes showed a touch of bitterness when he heard that. I understand. I won't be rash anymore. What do you understand? I'm still waiting for the day you fight with Jin Wuyang. If you die now, wouldn't it be a huge joke? Remember this, live well. Even if you have to live a plain and boring life, you have to live until the day you become an emperor. I will try my best. After killing Jian Wushuang, Yu Yao did not stop. She controlled the primordial purple intent and left the ruins of the 3rd and 5th heaven. She wanted to find Zhongli, Yan Fan, and the others who had escaped earlier and eliminate them one by one. She was now an emperor-to-be. Wherever the primordial purple intent covered, it was her domain. Feeling the fate energy that had transcended the shackles, the sadness in Yu Yao's heart finally dissipated. She was already an emperor-to-be and no one could be his enemy. Only another emperor-to-be could fight her. The dim sky followed Yu Yao as she continued to move forward, being devoured by the primordial purple intent. However, a moment later, a faint aura appeared, causing Yu Yao to stop in her tracks. She stood within her own emperor's fate energy, and her eyes turned slightly solemn. She felt an aura that could not be ignored. It was strange and domineering. When the end of the dark sky was replaced by an indescribable chaotic aura, Yu Yao's pupils suddenly shrank. Emperor, Emperor-to-be, an Emperor-to-be. As if to confirm her guess, a terrifying figure wearing the same imperial robe appeared along with the endless chaotic aura. That figure was like a black cloud, making it impossible for people to look straight at it and see it clearly. His body was surrounded by twisted and chaotic auras, which were extremely strange. If Jian Wushuang was here, he would be surprised. This was because the person who had come with the chaotic aura was the Emperor-to-be Black Cloud. It was the same person who was forced to self-destruct his own Emperor's fate energy. At this moment, he had completely recovered. It was as if he had never self-destructed the Emperor's fate energy. At the same time, thick chaotic chains bound the 4 figures in his palm. The 4 figures were Zhongli, Yan Fan, Di Qing, and Immortal Lord Fu Yao. They were all caught by Black Cloud and could not escape at all. They were already on their last breaths. Emperor-to-be Black Cloud slowly raised his head and met Yu Yao's eyes. Doubt, confusion, and bewilderment were revealed in his eyes, but they were soon replaced by an even stronger desire. The fate of an Emperor-to-be made him go crazy. Yu Yao's expression turned completely solemn. She could sense the power of the chaotic aura. It was actually on par with her primordial purple intent. Neither could do anything to the other. She had just become an Emperor-to-be, so she had to focus on stability. It was obviously not a wise move to make an enemy of another Emperor-to-be. However, she wanted to wipe out the few great Yen immortals in the hands of this mysterious Emperor-to-be. She felt troubled. Their eyes met. The primordial purple intent and the chaotic aura collided and squeezed, causing the sky to shatter. Wow, not bad. My luck is really quite good. To be able to meet an emperor like me here, Black Cloud said in a hoarse voice as he laughed. Yu Yao felt very uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable. She felt as if her divine sense was being nibbled away. However, she finally decided to speak. She said coldly, I was chasing after those grand Yen immortals. Return them to me. Return them to you? Black Cloud laughed softly. Of course not. They are also my mortal enemies. I want to crush them into powder with my own hands. Yu Yao's expression was uncertain. In the end, she did not plan to speak. To her, it did not matter who killed Zhongli and Yanfan, as long as they died. She turned around and was about to leave when Black Cloud's strange voice sounded again. Wait, I want to ask you something. I will not speak to you. Yu Yao replied coldly, preparing to leave in an instant. Black Cloud opened his mouth wide, and chaotic aura surged out. He smiled sinisterly. You want to leave now? As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his halberd, and chaotic chains pierced through the air, heading straight for Yu Yao. You're courting death. Yu Yao was furious, and she frowned. In an instant, boundless primordial purple intent burst forth, brazenly welcoming the attack. The primordial purple intent was simply too overwhelming. It directly devoured the chaotic chains, leaving no trace behind. Then, the primordial purple intent did not lose its momentum and turned into billions of rain curtains that hovered above Black Cloud. Black Cloud's eyelids twitched violently before he waved his hand with an exaggerated expression. Stop, stop, stop. We are all emperors. If you do this, no one will benefit from it. Yu Yao coldly snorted and withdrew her primordial purple intent before preparing to leave. Wait a minute. Aren't you going to take these few? Black Cloud spoke again, his eyes brimming with evil. I don't want them. You can do whatever you want. Just kill them all. Yu Yao said without turning her head, as if she did not want to stay any longer. No. I suddenly changed my mind. I want to let them go and let them say what they want to say. Spread it to the world. Yu Yao quietly stopped in her tracks, her expression completely cold. Are you going against me? I don't have such thoughts, not even a little bit. I'm just telling the truth. Black Cloud chuckled. How about this, let's make a deal. I'll give them to you, and you tell me a piece of information. Suppressing the anger in her heart, Yu Yao looked at him coldly and said, What do you want to know? Black Cloud stared at her and said slowly, What I want to know is very simple. Have you seen the Yen Immortal who was with them? Yu Yao's expression fluctuated slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. However, her heart was already in turmoil. To be able to attract the covetous eyes of another emperor-to-be, it seemed that Jian Wushuang's group had already been targeted. The fate energy of the three great Daos he carried was indeed too tempting. Even Yu Yao, who had already become an emperor-to-be, had coveted it and swallowed it. Thinking of this, she was certain that Black Cloud was here to capture Jian Wushuang and devour his fate energy. However, once he knew that Jian Wushuang's fate energy had been devoured, he was afraid that there would be a battle. After pondering for a moment, Yu Yao said, "I've never seen him before, so I can't answer you." Zhongli, Yan Fan, Di Qing, and Immortal Lord Fueyo, who were bound by the chains of chaos, felt their hearts sink when they saw her appear alone. This already meant that Jian Wushuang had met with misfortune. After Yu Yao's words, they were even more certain that Jian Wushuang was dead. Oh, really? It seemed to be a pity. Black Cloud shook his head slightly. At this moment, Di Qing, who was bound by the chaotic chains, spoke. "She has him. We all escaped from her hands." Hearing this, Black Cloud suddenly raised his head and stared at Yu Yao with his devilish eyes. Yu Yao was startled, and the boundless primordial purple intent behind her fluctuated slightly. She had never expected Di Qing and the others to speak. "Nonsense," Yu Yao said in a deep voice. She did not plan to stay any longer and directly turned to leave. "I haven't finished speaking. How can you leave?" Black Cloud laughed softly, the evil light in his eyes already solidified. In the next moment, an endless chaotic aura burst forth, like billions of demonic snakes grabbing toward Yu Yao. Under the impact of this chaotic aura, the primordial purple intent actually dimmed. Yu Yao was furious. She waved her imperial robe and a similarly chaotic primordial purple intent burst forth. When the two collided, the sky shattered, and the endless sea instantly caved in, sinking hundreds of millions of feet. This was a battle between Emperor-to-be and Emperor-to-be. It was filled with the aura of destruction and breaking the ancient times. If they were not in the endless sea, just the aura emitted by the two of them was enough to destroy 1,000,000 heavenly regions. Even Grand Yen Immortals were like ants. In this first clash, the two Emperor-to-be retreated 30,000 meters, and even their Emperor's fate energy was greatly restrained. Yu Yao stood with her hands behind her back. Although her expression was normal, the blood in her body was already in turmoil. Black Cloud was not any better. He was even more severely injured. After all, it had only been a short period of time since he had been revived. It was not easy for him to do this. Neither of them had gained any advantage, so they were naturally more cautious. It was Black Cloud who spoke first. "It seems that the fate energy of that puny little Yen Immortal has already been monopolized by you." "So what?" Yu Yao said in a deep voice, already prepared to respond. "If that's the case," Black Cloud chuckled, "give me half of his fate energy and I'll let you go. How about we not disturb each other?" Yu Yao's expression changed slightly. She had indeed guessed that he wanted Jian Wushuang's great fate energy and wanted to take a share of it. However, how could she hand over the fate energy that had already been swallowed into her stomach? "What if I say no?" Yu Yao coldly said that they were both Emperor-to-bes, so how could she be afraid? "If that's the case, then I'll have to take it personally." Black Cloud laughed loudly. His ever-changing face was now extremely ferocious. This was the first time he had fought an Emperor-to-be since he became an Emperor-to-be. If he could devour another Emperor-to-be in this battle, he would become a true emperor. Yu Yao had the same thought, so she did not take even half a step back. Facing another Emperor-to-be, she was also drooling. This battle was a fight between emperors. The emperor was the ruler of all things. All fate energy and other unspeakable things were under the imperial emperor's control. They were already supreme beings, and the only person who could cause an emperor to die was another emperor. As for Emperor-to-be, they had already comprehended their own emperor's fate energy, but for some reason, they could not become a true emperor. However, an emperor-to-be was still a supreme existence that could not be touched. Even a 9 revolutions grand Yen Immortal could not contend against him. This battle was a battle between the emperors. Boundless chaotic aura rose and covered the void as far as the eye could see. At this moment, the primordial purple intent also erupted with dazzling power. Immortals compete for power. Emperors compete for fate energy. Once one became an emperor-to-be, they would fight for the fate energy. Emperors would no longer use immortal styles because all immortal styles could not bear the full release of the emperor's fate energy. Instead, they used emperor-style moves, and these supreme moves came in all forms, fitting for an emperor's usage. The chaotic emperor's throne was the emperor style of emperor-to-be Black Cloud. The primordial immortal array was the emperor style of emperor-to-be Yu Yao. In the next moment, they all unleashed their strongest emperor styles without any hesitation. The chaotic emperor's throne was as high as the heavens, and it descended quickly. Even if a grand Yen Immortal looked at it directly, their divine sense would collapse and fall into chaos. The primordial immortal array could encompass 10,000 domains. It was condensed from the blood and fate energy of countless Yen Immortals and grand Yen Immortals. It was extremely grand. The chaotic aura was as dark as a dark cloud, pressing down. The primordial purple intent was as deep as divine blood as it swept and flowed. At this moment, it was a battle of fate energies between emperor-to-be. Everything was collapsing. If this was the Great Sea region, tens of thousands of heavenly regions would have been destroyed. Black Cloud's evil eyes stared at Yu Yao, only having the desire to devour her. Yu Yao's eyes were filled with disgust. She had to do everything she could to defeat him. Otherwise, if she were to fall into a stalemate, it would be extremely disadvantageous to her. Zhang Li, Yan Fan, and Di Qing looked at each other with bitterness in their eyes. They were all bound and could not move at all. Once the battle started, they would definitely be affected, but they could only leave it to fate. The next moment, Black Cloud attacked first. He did not control the chaotic emperor's throne behind him. Instead, he released billions of chaotic chains and shot them forward. This was a test. Yu Yao's emperor fate energy had already condensed into a primordial immortal array that was impossible to break. The billions of chaotic chains shot over, but when they collided with the primordial immortal array, they shattered and were absorbed. After the first test, the chaotic chains disappeared without a trace. Black Cloud raised his eyes slightly. He knew that Yu Yao was not a simple person, so he stopped underestimating her. As the billions of chaotic chains were devoured, Yu Yao, who was in the center of the immortal array, revealed a look of disdain. Her immortal array could destroy any emperor-to-be attack. As long as she focused on defending, the enemy would not be able to break it. However, Black Cloud smiled strangely and charged forward. The chaotic emperor's throne, which was powerful enough to destroy the 9 heavens, also moved out with him at this moment. Buzz! The chaotic emperor's throne emitted layers of ripples that pressed forward. Under this attack, the primordial immortal array could not help but fluctuate. This fluctuation caused Yu Yao's expression to turn grave. She felt as if the entire immortal array was shaking. Standing outside the immortal array, Black Cloud smiled sinisterly. Then, in front of Yu Yao, he split his immortal body into billions of daos. Billions of chaotic auras transformed into billions of his own clones, surrounding the entire primordial immortal array. Through the immortal array, Yu Yao looked at black clouds that seemed to surround the mountain and sea outside, and she became a little nervous. "Since you won't come out, I can only barge in," Black Cloud said in a low voice as he raised his arms. In the next moment, billions of black clouds raised their arms at the same time. Endless chaotic aura rose and condensed into an infinite pillar of light. Then, a chaotic emperor's throne that shook the entire area quietly condensed on the primordial immortal array. Yu Yao's eyes widened. This throne was even more magnificent than the primordial immortal array. An indescribable aura of suppression descended from above her head. Once this primordial immortal array could not withstand it, she would definitely be severely injured. Thinking of this, Yu Yao gritted her teeth. Endless primordial purple intent burst forth. Supporting the entire primordial immortal array with all her might, This was the strongest collision between Emperor-to-be and Emperor-to-be. None of them held back and went all out. Black Cloud roared, and the Super Chaos Emperor's throne pressed down heavily. Boom! An indescribable explosion swept through the void, and the void was destroyed into eternal nothingness. Under this explosion, even Grand Yen Immortals would not be able to survive. Zhongli, Yen Fan, and the others, whose luck had already been drained by Yu Yao, could not withstand this attack anymore. They all spat out divine blood and then fainted. In this eternal void, it was the battle between Emperor-to-be and Emperor-to-be's fate energy. The Super Chaos Emperor's throne pressed down, and the primordial immortal array erupted with a dazzling light. These two emperor styles were actually in a stalemate for a moment. The two forces pressed against each other, and cracks appeared in the middle. Black Cloud was already on the verge of madness. He controlled billions of clones to attack the primordial immortal array. The void trembled as fate gathered together. Yu Yao, who was in the center of the immortal array, felt her blood boiling under the pressure of the chaotic emperor's throne. "Let's see how long you'll hide. If you don't come out, I'll go in," Black Cloud said crazily. The endless destructive aura began to erode the immortal array. Looking at the cracks on the primordial immortal array, Yu Yao no longer defended it. Billions of primordial purple intent gathered behind her and turned into a Tao-breaking purple spear, piercing the bottom of the chaotic emperor's throne. Boom! The purple flames exploded, and endless emperor's fate energy erupted. The bottom of the Chaos Emperor's throne shattered, and billions of chaotic auras were obliterated into nothingness. Black Cloud retreated heavily, and his pale face was covered with fine black patterns. He was heavily injured, and even the billions of figures surrounding the primordial immortal array shattered. "Ah!" he cried out in pain, his immortal body almost shattering at this moment. He had just woken up from the destruction, and with his current strength, he was unable to deal any serious damage to Yu Yao, who was also an emperor-to-be. On the contrary, it was easy for him to be heavily injured. Seeing this scene, she was secretly overjoyed. She did not have much hope for that attack just now, but she did not expect it to injure Black Cloud so badly. In a battle between emperor-to-be, once one side was heavily injured, the outcome would be decided. Facing the heavily injured Black Cloud, no matter how cautious Yu Yao was, she could not remain calm. If she could successfully devour Black Cloud's emperor's fate energy, she would definitely become a true emperor. Emperor-to-be and a true emperor. The difference was unimaginable. Only by becoming a true emperor would one have the qualifications to fight with Jin Wuyang. As Yu Yao thought about this, she no longer hesitated. She brought the entire primordial immortal array and swallowed Black Cloud. Looking at the void that had been covered by the primordial purple intent, a hint of fear appeared in Black Cloud's eyes. He was already in a weakened state and had been heavily injured, so he was no longer able to withstand Yu Yao's emperor's fate energy. The great horror of life and death had already made Black Cloud ignore everything. He opened his mouth and shouted at the void, I promise you, as long as you let me recover completely, I'm willing to become your emissary." As Black Cloud's voice fell, a layer of ripples suddenly appeared in the void with him as the center. Then, a pair of pale palms without any blood reached out from the ripples and hovered above his head. Countless tiny dust particles emitted an indescribable aura of fate energy. They fell from the palms and poured around Black Cloud. Looking at this strange scene, Yu Yao felt a sense of foreboding. In order to prevent this from happening, she immediately unleashed an unimaginable amount of fate energy. She condensed another Tao-breaking purple spear and shot it toward Black Cloud. If this attack hit him, he would definitely die, and his emperor's fate energy would dissipate. But in the next moment, something unexpected happened. Black Cloud, who was on the verge of death, suddenly opened his eyes. His pale face looked straight ahead with a faint smile. He actually had no intention of dodging. Facing the primordial Tao-breaking purple spear that was filled with an ancient power, Black Cloud smiled sinisterly. He did not dodge. He slowly raised his right arm and pointed forward. The Tao-breaking purple spear tore through the void and shot over. The spear tip was forcefully stopped against the fingertip. Strands of extremely pure chaotic aura surged out from his fingertips and covered the entire spear. Then, it shattered in an instant. The Tao-breaking purple spear was shattered by a single finger. Yu Yao was shocked and hurriedly retreated. The primordial immortal array was also summoned. Standing up slowly, Black Cloud looked at his repaired immortal body. His body was in its peak state and he felt great satisfaction. At this moment, his Emperor's fate energy and his immortal body had completely recovered to their peak state. This was the reason why he could destroy Yu Yao's Emperor style with a single finger. He had completely recovered, and his previously weakened state disappeared. Facing Yu Yao, Black Cloud's eyes were filled with greed and hatred. Yu Yao, who had sensed that something was wrong, could no longer retreat because she was surrounded. This time, I will smash you into pieces and swallow you into my stomach bit by bit. Black Cloud suppressed her and roared crazily. At the same time, a super chaotic Emperor's throne descended again. He raised his arms high and smashed down heavily on the primordial immortal array. Boom! Boundless shockwaves exploded out, engulfing the void and destroying everything. Black Cloud raised the chaotic Emperor's throne again and smashed it down heavily. The attacks became heavier and faster. The primordial immortal array could not withstand it at all. Cracks covered it and it could shatter at any moment. Looking at the chaotic Emperor's throne above her head, Yu Yao remained calm. A true sword that was surrounded by primordial purple intent quietly condensed in her palm. In the next moment, she drew her sword and flew up. As the entire immortal array collapsed, her entire body turned into a flash and she brazenly crashed into the chaotic Emperor's throne. Billions of multicolored light shot out, causing a loud cry. Under the impact of this attack, the billions of clones released by Black Cloud were directly shattered into powder, and he had no choice but to retreat 10,000 feet. With her sword strike, Black Cloud's Emperor style collapsed. When the super chaotic Emperor's throne shattered, Yu Yao stood in the air with her sword, her face pale. The palm that she placed behind her holding the primordial true sword was already drenched in divine blood. The sword strike that broke the Emperor style was a huge drain on her. Although Black Cloud was also damaged, it was definitely not as serious as hers. The originally good situation had already been quietly reversed at this moment. Black Cloud's body swayed unsteadily, like a tangible cloud, and he instantly arrived in front of Yu Yao. I've said before that you only need to hand over half of that little Yen Immortal's fate energy, and I'll let you go, but you're too selfish and you've rejected my request. He sighed faintly. In that case, I have no choice but to swallow your aura. Hearing this, Yu Yao sneered. Are you that confident that you can take me down? Do you think you can continue to struggle? Black Cloud revealed a mysterious smile, and then he quietly raised his arms. Ripples appeared in the air, and a painting appeared, causing Yu Yao's eyes to widen. Immortal Lords Yaoer, I'll go ahead and offer you my last bit of fate energy. Along with this familiar voice, the figure of the immortal Lord Zungu appeared. He was dressed in a flying cloud robe. His expression was indifferent, but he looked at Yu Yao with a longing look. Then he stepped into the swirling array core. In an instant, his immortal body shattered and turned into powder to fill the array core. No. Why is this scene happening again? Yu Yao's eyes were filled with terror as she subconsciously retreated. As immortal Lord Zungu fell into the core of the array, the scene changed again. Thousands, even tens of thousands of Grand Yen Immortals rushed into the core of the array like moths to a flame. This scene was too tragic. The Grand Yen Immortals sacrificed all their fate energy just to buy a few breaths of time. When the dust settled, Yu Yao was the only one left in the painting. Boundless fate energy poured into her body. TSK. I thought that I was the only one who would resort to such unscrupulous means in order to gain enlightenment of the Emperor's fate energy. I didn't expect that compared to you, my deeds were insignificant. Black Cloud's mocking voice rang out faintly. In order to comprehend the Emperor's fate energy, you lured and killed all the Grand Yen Immortals under you. I want to learn from you on this point. Yu Yao's eyes were wide open, unable to extricate herself from the pain. In that painting, everything was a nightmare. It was the past that she had tried her best to hide and forget. She did not expect it to appear again and become her real nightmare. This trauma caused Yu Yao's divine sense to fluctuate, unable to fuse and reach perfection. Looking at her in pain, Black Cloud's lips curled into a smile. Seeing through the nightmare in her heart and magnifying it several times to show it again was his true specialty. As long as her divine sense had not reached perfection, nothing could escape his eyes. Black Cloud had yet to see a person whose divine sense had reached perfection. She could no longer control the pain of being trapped in chaos. Black Cloud also disappeared at this moment. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yu Yao. Chains of chaos burst out from his palm like real swords, stabbing into her immortal body. Hundreds of chaotic chains pierced Yu Yao's limbs and immortal body, firmly locking her in the void. She could not suppress the pain, but it was already too late. Divine blood splattered everywhere, and the Emperor's fate energy began to dissipate rapidly. What a pity! I didn't expect an Emperor-to-be's divine sense to be so weak. Even a single image is enough to destroy it. Black Cloud looked at her, half regretful and half mocking. But it's no wonder. It must be a wonderful feeling to trap and kill one's loyal subordinates. Your scheming makes me tremble. You've been waiting for this day, and it seems like you've already decided from the very beginning. If your dead subordinates knew that you had already set up this situation from the beginning, what would they think? By the end of his sentence, Black Cloud had already started laughing maniacally. He seemed to be enjoying this feeling. Yu Yao's face was completely pale, and her eyes had already lost their luster. How boring. You designed it for so long, but in the end you still gave everything you took to me. Black Cloud shook his head. He could not wait to devour it. As long as he swallowed the fate energy of an emperor-to-be, he would definitely become an emperor. In the next moment, Yu Yao, whose eyes had already lost their luster, quietly raised her head and looked at Black Cloud with a faint smile. Then, she raised her broken right arm. A true sword surrounded by primordial purple essence emitted an unparalleled light. Black Cloud was speechless as he watched the primordial true sword stab into his chest. The Emperor's robe shattered, and endless primordial purple intent erupted. At this moment, the two incompatible Emperors' fate energy fused and quickly cancelled each other out. The terror of life and death made Black Cloud roar. Chains of chaos shot out and broke through the purple mist, stabbing into Yu Yao's immortal body again. Endless divine blood spilled down. This was already a situation that would not end until one of them died. They had all gone crazy and given up on controlling their own Emperor's fate energy. They were using their own bodies to fight. Although had not reached the realm of Emperor, their immortal bodies were one level stronger than a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. They were still immortal bodies and not Emperor bodies. However, the Emperor-to-be had something that the Grand Yen Immortal didn't, and that was the Emperor Bone. The Emperor Bone was the foundation of an Emperor-to-be, and it was an important item that led to becoming an Emperor. Although the Emperor-to-be still had an immortal body with the Emperor Bone, even if his immortal body was broken, he could quickly recover. Emperor-to-be Yu Yao's immortal body was almost completely damaged by the chaotic chains, but it was rapidly recovering. All of this was because of the Emperor Bone. However, Black Cloud, who had the upper hand earlier, was now in an even more miserable state. Even though he had been restored to his peak state by the unknown power, his immortal body could not withstand Yu Yao's attack because Jian Wushuang had extracted his Emperor Bone. His immortal body shattered even more, and the damage he received far exceeded the speed of recovery. He was retreating slowly. Although Yu Yao's injuries were less severe than Black Cloud's, her divine sense was already in chaos, and she was struggling to hold on. If they continued to risk their life like this, Black Cloud, who did not have Emperor Bone, would be the first to perish. Both of them were already at the end of their rope, but neither of them was willing to be the first to retreat. This was because if they were ambushed while retreating, even if they did not die, they would be powerless to turn the situation around. The chaotic aura and the primordial purple intent had already completely clashed. Hundreds and thousands of chaotic chains pierced through Yu Yao's immortal body, devouring and strangling her. Yu Yao held the primordial true sword in one hand and the Tao-breaking primordial purple spear in the other. She also stabbed into Black Cloud's chest. Divine blood splattered everywhere, and the Emperor's fate energy was also being destroyed. No matter how crazy Black Cloud was, he knew the severity of the situation. Looking at Yu Yao, whose divine sense was gradually becoming clearer, he gritted his teeth and ripples appeared in the void. As the ripples spread out, Black Cloud's figure disappeared and was replaced by Immortal Lord Zungu. Divine blood gushed out of his eyes and ears. Only his true eyes were still clear, revealing a complicated expression. Yaoer, I am the Zungu. Yu Yao was shocked, and the primordial purple spear in her hand instantly fell into the void. No, you're not. Zungu is already dead. The Immortal Lord Zungu's eyes turned into pain again. In the end, he said, Yaoer, why did you do that? You know that we only want to get out. Yu Yao's entire body trembled, and her Emperor's fate energy nearly dissipated. At this moment, her divine sense was completely in chaos. No, it's all fake. Zungu, I also want to go out, but what can I do if I go out? Zhen Wuyang won't let us off. The Immortal Lord Zungu did not say anything else and only looked at her in pain. Then, the Grand Yen Immortals who had died in the Galaxia Immortal Array all walked out from the void ripples. They looked at Yu Yao with sorrowful expressions and did not say a word. Looking at the tens of thousands of Grand Yen Immortals that she once served, Yu Yao had completely collapsed. Although she was already an emperor-to-be, the collapse of her divine sense made her unable to move. That tragic scene became a nightmare in her heart. In order to become an emperor, she had weaved a lie that lasted for countless years. And this lie had killed all the Yen Immortals who had followed her. Divine blood flowed out of her eyes along with her tears. The endless primordial purple intent was also destroyed at this moment. Immortal Lord Zungu and all the Grand Yen Immortals slowly dissipated, leaving only Black Cloud standing where they were. An indecipherable look flashed in the depths of his eyes before he returned to normal. Arriving in front of Yu Yao, he slowly raised his right palm. Chains of primal chaos shot out from his palm and bound Yu Yao. Her divine sense had collapsed, and she no longer had the will to fight. Her Emperor's fate energy had been destroyed. Give me all your fate energy. I will live well for you. The corners of Black Cloud's mouth curled up as the chaotic chains began to devour her fate energy. At this moment, Zhongli, Yanfan, and Di Qing had already woken up. Only the weak Immortal Lord Fu Yueo was still unconscious. They looked at each other and nodded. Although they were still bound by the chains of chaos, they could still do simple actions. After making the decision, they quickly fled. Di Qing looked at the unconscious Fu Yao and felt sorry for her. In the end, he gritted his teeth and prepared to leave with her. However, Black Cloud's sinister voice rang out. You want to leave? Stay here. After saying that, four chaotic chains shot over and caught them in an instant, dragging them in front of Black Cloud. All of you belong to me. He gave a strange smile, and the chaotic chains directly absorbed the fate energy. Zhongli, Yanfan, Di Qing, and Fu Yao were all in pain. Their fate energy had already been devoured by Yu Yao, and now that it was being devoured again, they could only die. Their fate energy has already been absorbed by me. Let them leave and I'll give all my fate energy to you. Yu Yao, whose hair was disheveled and had lost her will to fight, suddenly said softly. Black Cloud was stunned. Then he grinned. Pretending to be merciful? Now that you're all in my hands, you're still negotiating terms? I want them all. Yu Yao did not say anything more. She looked up at them, then lowered her head. Even if Di Qing refused to accept his fate, he was already powerless to turn the situation around. It seemed that their final destination was to die completely. Black Cloud had gone completely mad. The fate energy of an emperor-to-be and 3-9 revolutions great Yen Immortals was in his hands. He could no longer be stopped from becoming a true emperor. At this moment, the entire void had been engulfed by the chaotic aura. The endless chaotic chains covered everything. He did not notice that in the void of silence, from the end of the endless, a light quietly appeared. This light was too vast, as if it was descending from the 9 heavens. When Black Clouds and the others finally noticed it, the light had long covered the world and bloomed. It was a sword strike. It was as if billions of tassels were falling. Each sword intent easily cut open the void. It was said that in every heavenly region, there was a peak of a divine mountain, and on the peak, there would be a 7-leaf sword grass. When the 7-leaf sword grass bloomed completely, even the stellar sun would dim. At this moment, countless 7-leaf sword grass seemed to have bloomed in the entire void. It was impossible to look directly at them. This sword strike was too powerful. Every strand of sword intent easily cut through the chaotic aura and then bloomed wantonly. An unparalleled and pure force completely erupted. Black Cloud's eyes suddenly widened. Even though he was already an emperor-to-be, facing this sword strike, only the terror of life and death surged into his heart. He could easily feel that if he did not retreat, this sword strike would definitely injure him severely or even kill him. But how could he let go of the emperor-to-be fate energy in his hands? Ah! Black Cloud roared, and in the next moment, he actually tried to drag the chains along with Yu Yao. However, Yu Yao suddenly grabbed the chaotic chains in her body and gave a strange smile. She used all her strength to drag him under the sword curtain. Billions of sword intents intersected with each other, bringing with them a clear sword hum as they descended. At this moment, in the eternal void, there was only sword intent. Everything was being destroyed. Yu Yao held Black Cloud tightly, exposing herself to the sword screen without any intention of resisting. Only Black Cloud's roar continued, and it was soon swallowed up. Zhongli, Yan Fan, Di Qing, and Fu Yao all shut their eyes tightly, resigned themselves to fate. The sword Dao was eternal. The vast sword intent that covered the eternal void lasted for a long time. When the sword intent dissipated, Zhongli and Di Qing opened their eyes at the same time. Then, they were so shocked that they could not speak. Jian Wushuang reappeared in front of them. His chest was bare, and his entire body was enveloped by an unknown dark green aura. It was completely different from the Emperor aura that flowed around him previously, but it was even deeper. They gulped in unison. "I'm late. Sorry to have kept you guys waiting." Jian Wushuang instructed and turned around slowly. As he turned around, the dark green aura flowing around his body rose and circulated. The sword curtain dissipated, and Black Cloud covered his chest. He spat out large mouthfuls of divine blood and shattered Emperor's fate energy. At that moment, Yu Yao, who had been seeking death wholeheartedly, suffered even more injuries. Her entire immortal body was almost completely shattered, and her divine blood had already been drained. Only the Emperor's fate energy was supporting her life. Seeing that it was Jian Wushuang, Yu Yao's eyes were filled with disbelief and an indescribable sense of relief. Black Cloud was terrified, completely terrified. He had never thought that the nightmare would return again, and in an unimaginable manner. Black Clouds trembled. He could feel that Jian Wushuang was still terrifying. The dark green aura of the flowing clouds blocked everything and made Jian Wushuang look like a supreme emperor. This scene caused Black Cloud to tremble from the bottom of his heart. It was as if the past had returned. Countless years ago, Shen Wuyang, who had destroyed his body and soul with a single slap, had appeared just like this. His eyes were indifferent, and with supreme fate energy, he had easily destroyed a heavenly court. Now, Jian Wushuang gave him the same feeling. No, it has nothing to do with me. I didn't do anything. If you want to blame someone, blame that woman. Black Cloud spoke in fear, no longer caring about his dignity. Looking at Black Cloud, who was about to kneel on the ground in fear, Yu Yao was a little surprised. It was easy for an emperor-to-be to kill a 9 revolutions great Yen Immortal, so why would he be afraid of a puny little Yen Immortal? Furthermore, this puny little Yen Immortal had died in her hands. Although Yu Yao was shocked that Jian Wushuang had come back from the dead, it did not mean that she was afraid. Therefore, she was puzzled by Black Cloud's abnormal behavior. At this moment, Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and said in an indifferent voice, "You know what you have done. Today, one of you will settle the score with the other. Neither of you will leave here alive." Black Cloud's body trembled as if his fate had been sealed. His gaze shifted from Black Cloud to Yu Yao. Their eyes met. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with cold and murderous intent. Yu Yao felt a chill down her spine. At the same time, she felt that the aura he was emitting was not something that a Yen immortal could have. "Hey, don't just stand there. If you don't want to die today, we must join forces," Black Cloud said in a trembling voice. Yu Yao completely ignored him, even feeling that it was somewhat ridiculous. A puny little Yen immortal could actually scare an emperor-to-be to this extent? "Tell me, are you going to join hands or not?" Black Cloud shouted anxiously. "Get lost." Yu Yao looked at him and roared angrily. A primordial true sword suddenly condensed in her hand. Her mentality of seeking death had already changed, leaving only endless killing intent. Not only was Black Cloud not enraged by the scolding, he was even more delighted than before. This was exactly what he wanted to see. Once they fought, he could use this opportunity to leave. Thinking of this, Black Cloud quietly retreated. When he faced Yu Yao, who had already become an emperor-to-be, Jian Wushuang was still not afraid. He only felt contempt. Yu Yao couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry, as well as endless killing intent. At this moment, Jian Wushuang quietly condensed an invisible sword. This time, the invisible sword was no longer formless. Instead, its entire body was covered in a dark green color, and it was deep and strange. The tip of the dark green invisible sword was pointed at Yu Yao as he said calmly, "Today, I only have one goal, and that is to kill you here." She only felt that it was ridiculous. A Yen immortal who had died in her hands not long ago would actually say such arrogant words. "Although I don't know how you survived, since you've appeared in front of me today, you're bound to die in my hands again," Yu Yao said coldly, and her boundless killing intent exploded. Jian Wushuang smiled and his golden eyes turned dark green. A deep and vigorous aura burst out from his body. This was an unprecedented and mysterious aura. It was different from before, but it was vast and surging. Black Cloud was so nervous that he could not speak. He could feel the change in Jian Wushuang, so he was terrified. This time, the aura was even gloomier and more brutal. It was filled with a sinister coldness. Black Cloud had a feeling that if he did not run away the moment they fought, he would never have the chance to escape. Thinking of this, he was already planning a way out. Yu Yao was also extremely furious. Facing Jian Wushuang, she held the primordial true sword and slashed forward without hesitation. "Now's the time, run." Black Cloud did not hesitate at all. The instant they exchanged blows, his figure completely disappeared and he fled frantically. Jian Wushuang smiled contemptuously as the endless primordial purple intent poured down. Then, he held the sword hilt with both hands and slashed out casually. The dark green long sword slashed out in the endless void. In an instant, it expanded by hundreds of millions of feet. At this moment, even the void was sliced apart by the ink-green sword. The primordial purple intent clashed with the trillion-meter-long ink-green sword slash. It was as if a brocade was torn apart, the celestial river was cut off, and the endless primordial purple intent was cut apart, as if without resistance at all. The primordial purple intent shattered and turned into billions of tassels that fell from the void. However, the momentum of the ink-green sword slash did not decrease as it directly slashed towards Yu Yao. The indescribable horror shocked her. She did not even think about it and raised her primordial true sword in front of her to block. Ding! The crisp and melodious sword chime was fleeting and disappeared in an instant. The primordial purple intent was completely shattered, and the inky green sword slash disappeared. It was as if nothing had ever happened. However, in the next moment, the long hair on Yu Yao's left ear broke, and the primordial true sword in front of her also broke into two from the tip of the sword. The power of a single sword had forced an emperor-to-be backed into a corner. Yu Yao was completely shocked. She did not dare to believe it. She had clearly killed this guy easily before, so why did he give her a feeling that she could not fathom him now? Black Cloud, who was fleeing for his life, naturally saw this scene. Seeing Yu Yao being crushed, he could not help but smile. However, when he turned around, he was shocked to find that the path ahead was blocked by a dark green barrier. The barrier was extremely tough, as if it was made of layers of dark green feathers. It was extremely treacherous. Cold sweat dripped from his temples. He suddenly realized that Jian Wushuang had no intention of letting them leave alive when he attacked. Jian Wushuang's eyes were completely replaced by an inky green color, and his entire body emitted a powerful aura. He had used Lu Ya's divine sense and one of the six paths Emperor's fate energy. The Emperor Lu Ya's surging Emperor's fate energy had already surged into his immortal body. Thanks to the strange characteristics of the undying and imperishable immortal body, Jian Wushuang could almost perfectly absorb and integrate with any Emperor's fate energy and unleash its full power. The fate energy of a true Emperor and Emperor Lu Ya were now fully unleashed in his body. It was so terrifying that even Jian Wushuang could not explain it. He was only a peak immortal Yen realm expert, but he could fight an emperor-to-be. Recovering from her shock, Yu Yao looked at him with a complicated expression. Jian Wushuang was too lazy to waste his breath on her. For a person who had set up such a vicious plan to kill all the Yen immortals who followed her, even if she became an emperor-to-be, there would only be one outcome. She must die. Holding the dark green longsword in his hand, at this moment, thousands of sword intents merged into one. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. Second move. The river, the majestic celestial river, flowed out of the eternal void. Billions of sword intent condensed together, forming a super sword river. Different from before, the sword river this time was like the endless sea, filled with dead silence, coldness, and desolation. It was as if it had flowed from ancient times and had never been extinguished. This sword had surpassed the realm and was indescribable. As for Yu Yao, she finally understood why Black Cloud had lost his composure and begged for mercy. This was because the variables of this sword move were too great. Without any time to think, Yu Yao directly brought out the primordial immortal array. At the same time, a Tao-breaking primordial purple spear condensed in her hand. A tit-for-tat confrontation had already appeared. The majestic black celestial river swept over, and the entire primordial immortal array was instantly devoured. Yu Yao, who was in the center of the immortal array, felt her eyes turn dark, and there was no other color. An even more unbelievable scene appeared. The primordial immortal array, which was so strong that even black clouds could not break, actually shattered into countless fine cracks the moment they collided. It shattered in an instant. The chaotic black sword river roared and tore apart the primordial immortal array, devouring Yu Yao. Yu Yao could no longer remain calm. She held the Tao-breaking primordial purple spear and stabbed it toward the sword river. In an instant, the frenzied sword river was split into two. Yu Yao, who was at the center of the sword river tide, was trembling slightly. The sword river seemed endless, devouring her divine sense bit by bit. She struggled to hold on, and the arm holding the spear trembled even more. Just as Yu Yao was about to retreat, the endless sword river suddenly dissipated. However, before she could breathe a sigh of relief, at the end of the sword river, Jian Wushuang appeared quietly like a ghost, holding a dark green long sword. As the sword stabbed forward, Yu Yao subconsciously raised her Tao-breaking primordial purple spear to block. The Tao-breaking primordial purple spear that could even destroy Black Cloud's chaotic emperor's throne seemed to have lost its charm at this moment and became vulnerable. The tip of the sword easily shattered the tip of the spear, and the forward thrust did not lose its momentum. The entire Tao-breaking primordial purple spear exploded inch by inch, along with Yu Yao's right arm that was holding the spear. Slash! An extremely faint sound rang out, and then everything was silenced. She only felt an unbearable pain in her immortal body, and then she lowered her head to look. A dark green sword pierced through her right rib and pierced through her entire immortal body. Divine blood gushed out from the wound and sprinkled in the air. Her imperial robe shattered and her entire right arm disappeared. Under this sword strike, Yu Yao was utterly defeated. Her eyes were still filled with disbelief. As soon as she opened her mouth, divine blood flowed out. Jian Wushuang took half a step back, his eyes still cold. "Why? How did you do it? You're clearly just a Yen immortal," Yu Yao said in pain. She could feel the Emperor's fate energy within her immortal body rapidly dissipating. Jian Wushuang did not answer her, his eyes still filled with contempt. Immediately after, a cry that seemed to come from the 9 heavens resounded. Screech, then, behind Jian Wushuang, a huge totem made of dark green aura appeared. That totem was huge and filled with supreme pressure. The entire totem only depicted a large bird. The bird was like a flowing cloud. It was dark green and had 6 horns on its head. It was covered in thousands of feathers and was filled with supreme pressure. With the appearance of the huge totem, Jian Wushuang's immortal body revealed an aura that had never appeared before. Yu Yao's eyes widened as she staggered backward. She clearly knew what that aura represented, and it was precisely because of this that she was shocked. That was the Emperor's fate energy. A Yen immortal actually possessed the fate energy of an emperor. After a long while, she said bitterly, "Why do you have the Emperor's fate energy?" Jian Wushuang did not answer her question, but said calmly, "Do you want me to do it, or do you want to do it yourself?" Yu Yao was stunned, but she already knew what Jian Wushuang meant. She was speechless. She already knew that there was nothing she could do. With just a single sword strike, her immortal body was shattered. Yu Yao simply could not think of any way to resist. Preposterous. This is simply too preposterous. The Emperor's fate energy that I desired so much, now I'm in such a state. She shed tears, and her immortal body withered to the extreme at this moment. "I regret it. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place?" Jian Wushuang said slowly. Jian Wushuang had no pity for her. Moreover, she did not deserve any pity. Even if she regretted it, there was nothing she could do. Nothing could change. If the Galaxia Immortal Array had not been activated, would all of this not have happened? There were no ifs. Even an emperor-to-be would have to pay the price. When the ink-green longsword that had fused with Emperor Liu Ya's fate energy stabbed into her immortal body, the dust had already settled. Even if Yu Yao resisted, Jian Wushuang had several ways to kill her. Moreover, Jian Wushuang was not worried that she would resist because no one could save her now that she had the desire to die. The next step was for her to release her own fate energy. You guys are the variables. When you came to the 3rd and 5th heaven, I felt some changes in the unseen world. Yu Yao let out another wisp of divine blood. Her aura had already weakened. But I didn't expect things to go in the opposite direction. Now, I realize that even if I control the fate energy of an emperor, it will still be taken away by some unknown calamity. If it's not mine, it won't be mine in the end. My emperor's fate energy belongs to you now, you can take it. After she said that, she did not speak again. Instead, she released her emperor's fate energy and directed it to flow toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly and waved his hand to discard the emperor's fate energy. "I don't want to. You can release it yourself." Yu Yao's body froze, and a trace of sadness flashed across her eyes. "All right, then I'll undo it myself." After saying that, she did not stop and immediately dispelled her emperor's fate energy. In an instant, a gust of wind blew, and even the eternal void trembled. However, the scene of destruction did not appear again. After the wind swept across hundreds of millions of miles, it fell silent. The primordial purple intent resolved itself and completely returned to the void. Yu Yao did not do anything else. She was determined to die. Jian Wushuang stood in front of her and watched the scene calmly. Yet another emperor-to-be was trying to unravel the emperor's fate energy in front of him. He did not know how he felt, but he was neither happy nor sad. All of this should have had nothing to do with him, but in the end, it was all tainted by karma. It was just like when he was in the sand demon cave. Sha Qing had pushed him into the blood sea and tainted him with unknown karma. Jian Wushuang had always been in a passive position, but there was nothing he could do. Immediately after, the simple discussion with Kongluan under the Blood Sea also surfaced in his mind. Everything seemed to be coming to an end, but at the same time it also seemed to have never ended. As the Emperor's fate energy continued to dissipate, Yu Yao's immortal body became almost transparent. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Jian Wushuang. If you want to leave this place, the heavenly gate of the third and fifth layer of heaven is indeed the weakest point in the entire endless sea. I've never lied to you about this. She was about to die and her words were also good. Jian Wushuang nodded slowly. Yu Yao continued, actually, when I activated the Galaxia Immortal Array at the end, I changed my mind for a moment, but in the end, I couldn't resist the temptation. Hearing her words, Jian Wushuang knew that this was her final redemption. After saying this, Yu Yao's immortal body shattered into pieces without the support of the Emperor's fate energy. The endless primordial purple intent dissipated and filled the entire void as if it had never appeared. Jian Wushuang raised his hand to retrieve the dark green sword and stood with his hands behind his back. As she died, Zhongli, Yanfan, Di Qing, and Immortal Fu Yao came behind Jian Wushuang and looked at the place where Emperor-to-be Yu Yao disappeared in shock. They had all witnessed this battle and had yet to recover from the shock. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly and a hint of fatigue flashed in the depths of his eyes. He could not control the Imperial Emperor's fate energy that he had absorbed from the Luya Heavenly Emperor runes. If this continued, his immortal body would collapse. However, he still did not plan to disperse Emperor Luya's fate energy because he still had things to do. Emperor-to-be Yu Yao's fate was completely destroyed and the primordial purple intent dissipated. Jian Wushuang thought that there was nothing left behind, but something rose from the place where Yu Yao disappeared. The dense primordial purple intent that was almost impossible to dissipate wrapped around a piece of sparkling white bone. His gaze was solemn. Another emperor bone. As if it had sensed something, the primordial purple intent in the air brought the emperor bone to Jian Wushuang. The emperor bone was one of the biggest differences between an emperor-to-be and a Yen immortal. Once the emperor bone was formed, it meant that there would be no more obstacles in the path of the emperor. The ownerless primordial intent smelled Jian Wushuang's powerful aura and submitted to him, offering Yu Yao's emperor bone. Jian Wushuang did not even accept her emperor fate energy, so he naturally did not want to accept this emperor bone. Although the emperor bone was the symbol of an emperor-to-be and carried an unimaginable power, it did not seem to have any effect on him. After thinking for a moment, Jian Wushuang finally decided to accept the emperor bone. With a wave of his hand, the emperor bone, which was emitting a primordial purple aura, fell into his palm. The warmth in his hand was completely different from Black Cloud's emperor bone. This was a hot potato. The less grand Yen immortals knew about it, the more secure it would be. Jian Wushuang now had 2 pieces of emperor bone. Although the emperor bones were useless, he still decided to keep them. After putting Yu Yao's emperor bone into the Boyang bottle, he took out several emperor-grade pills that could strengthen one's foundation and protect one's origin, giving them to Zhongli and Yanfan. Although his providence was still unable to recover, it had already been completely stabilized after consuming the emperor-grade pills. It was only a matter of time before he fully recovered. Jian Wushuang's body was still surging with fate energy, and the brilliance was so intense that one could not look directly at him. Then he looked into the distance. There was still a problem that had not been solved. What he needed to do was to solve it. Being blocked by some kind of black feather barrier, Black Cloud was already panicking to the extreme. In addition, he had personally witnessed Emperor-to-be Yu Yao's self-destruction, causing him to feel even more despair. He raised the chaotic emperor's throne high and tried to break the barrier. However, this ink-green feather barrier was even stronger than Yu Yao's primordial immortal array. He could not break it at all. Feeling the chill from his back, Black Cloud stopped what he was doing and slowly turned around. That nightmare-like Yen immortal was standing behind him, looking at him with a sinister smile. You've already killed me once. You've already extracted my emperor bone, so there's no reason for you to kill me again. Black Cloud took a deep breath and said. Hearing that, Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly. Oh, is that so? But why are you still alive? I remember that you have completely perished before. Black Cloud's heart skipped a beat. He could feel the cold killing intent in Jian Wushuang's voice. What do you mean? Nothing. I just want you to die completely? Jian Wushuang said in a low voice, and the dark green longsword condensed again. Feeling the surging aura, Black Cloud was shocked. Without thinking, he immediately flew away. You want to leave? Jian Wushuang did not stop. He pierced through the space with his sword. In an instant, the void collapsed. An unimaginable sword intent shot out and stabbed into the back of Black Cloud. Boom! Under this sword, his body was directly shattered into countless fragments. However, Jian Wushuang did not think that Black Cloud would die so easily. He was a special existence, and his immortal body was almost useless. As expected, when his immortal body shattered, hundreds of Black Cloud clones appeared. They looked back at Jian Wushuang and then flew away in all directions. Seeing this, Zhongli, Yanfan, and the others were anxious, but there was nothing they could do. Once an emperor-to-be wanted to escape, no one could stop him. However, Jian Wushuang remained calm. Even though hundreds of Black Cloud figures had appeared, he was not worried. In the next moment, he stretched out his hand and waved. A boundless ink-green feather barrier descended. The escaping Black Cloud figures all crashed into the barrier and turned into ashes. Only the real Black Cloud had a gloomy expression. The path was completely blocked, and Jian Wushuang was determined to kill him. Black Cloud's face was gloomy. He turned around and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was already approaching. He said coldly, "Do you really think you can defeat me? Isn't that so?" Jian Wushuang looked at him calmly. He smiled sinisterly. "Although I don't know how you obtained the Emperor's fate energy, I can tell that you are still a puny little Yen immortal. If I continue to waste my time with you, will I exhaust you to death? Then I want to see how you exhaust me to death." Jian Wushuang laughed and said, "A trapped beast had to fight. Once defeated, only death awaited." At this moment, Black Cloud was about to fight a bloody battle. At this moment, a vast and strange chaotic aura completely covered the entire green feather barrier. A super chaotic Emperor's throne appeared on top of Black Cloud. The entire void of silence turned completely dark. In order to not have any worries, Jian Wushuang had already pushed Zhongli, Yanfan, Di Qing, and Fuyao out of the barrier. At this moment, they were the only ones inside the barrier. Black Cloud attacked first. In order to gain the upper hand, he controlled the chaotic Emperor's throne and smashed it at Jian Wushuang. The chaotic Emperor's throne, which occupied half of the barrier, was too terrifying. Even Jian Wushuang, who was blessed with Emperor Fate energy, could not underestimate it. One had to know that he was only a peak-stage Yen immortal. If he was not careful, he would die on the spot. Therefore, when he saw the chaotic Emperor's throne flying over, Jian Wushuang drew his sword and did not dare to be careless. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Ocean Sword Intent. First move. Star. An ordinary sword slashed out, but in the next moment it shook the world. This sword made the void curl, and thousands of pillars of dark green light exploded. The two collided, and the super chaotic Emperor's throne shook violently. Then endless chaotic aura gushed out. Black Cloud's expression changed drastically. The chaotic Emperor's throne was almost shattered after just one exchange and was on the verge of collapsing. He gritted his teeth, and his immortal body surged with endless chaotic aura again, reinforcing the chaotic Emperor's throne. The aura was so strong that Zhongli, Yanfan, and the others outside the dark green feather barrier were a little shocked. Will something happen to Wushuang? Yanfan was rather nervous. I don't think so. Wushuang's fate energy is too great. It's over, Zhongli said. Everything will be settled in less than 10 seconds. Within the black feather enchantment, the situation was over. The chaotic Emperor's throne was gone, leaving only the eternal void. Jian Wushuang stood with his sword and looked ahead indifferently. Black Cloud was weakened, and the chaotic aura was mostly destroyed by that sword strike. A strange stream of black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. It's time to end it. Should I do it? Or should you resolve your own fate? Jian Wushuang said calmly, but his voice was filled with an undeniable majesty. Black Cloud's expression was gloomy. He already knew that it was impossible for him to win, facing Jian Wushuang's mighty fate energy. There was only one ending. However, he still smiled sinisterly. You're asking me to resolve my own fate? Do you think you can force me into a desperate situation? Jian Wushuang's face turned cold, and a totem that covered the sky suddenly appeared behind him. With the appearance of this totem, the chaotic aura in the entire ink-green feather barrier was instantly cleared. It was a chasing bird. It had 6 horns on its head, and it was covered in colorful feathers that could not be looked at directly. Even the endless void could not withstand its arrival and began to collapse and curl up again. Following the appearance of the totem, another image appeared behind Jian Wushuang. It was a black feather flowing cloud emperor robe. It reflected the extreme of all things in the world. Each feather was like a small world, containing endless power. A true emperor. Not a single grand Yen immortal could see his true face. He seemed to have walked out of the ancient era and arrived here. He stood quietly behind Jian Wushuang, shining with the huge chasing bird totem. At this moment, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and 100,000 inky green intent burst out. Not only that, but the brilliant emperor behind him also opened his eyes at this moment. A vast power, annihilation of ocean and dust. The universe collapsed. Everything was under his gaze. Black Cloud had even forgotten to escape. He instantly died under this mighty power. Almost at the same time, Jian Wushuang spat out a mouthful of divine blood, and his aura instantly weakened to the extreme. This was the true power of the Lu Ya Heavenly Emperor runes. Just the first move was enough to almost destroy Jian Wushuang's divine sense. Furthermore, he was unable to use the first move at all. He was only able to use this move by relying on Emperor Lu Ya's fate energy. The reason why he was unable to cultivate the Lu Ya Heavenly Emperor runes was because he had to be at least a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal to be qualified. The void was bright. This aura lasted for a long time before it slowly dissipated. The entire void had already been completely flattened. Even the endless sea beneath him had caved in by who knew how many trillions of feet. In the eternal void, there were only wisps of dark green aura flowing. Jian Wushuang was the only one who was still standing. Black Cloud had completely disappeared. Not even a trace of fate energy left behind. Everything was settled. Jian Wushuang's aura was weak. He could feel the Emperor's fate energy in his body dissipating. The undying and imperishable immortal body also began to shatter. After using 2 different Emperor's fate energy, his immortal body was like a container that was about to shatter. His face was pale, and his hand reached for the Boyang bottle at his waist. Jian Wushuang took out nearly 20 Emperor-grade pills and stuffed them into his mouth. Only then did his shattered immortal body feel better. The medicinal effects of 20 Emperor-grade pills were just enough to offset the side effects of using the Emperor's fate energy so rampantly. If he did not have these miracle pills, he would have died. How is it? Is it serious? Di Qing walked up quickly and said solemnly, "It's not a big deal, but I'm afraid I'll be weak for a period of time." He smiled bitterly. "It's fine. Everything is over. It's time for you to have a good rest." Yan Fan patted his shoulder and said. Jian Wushuang nodded. Everything had been settled. The 2 Emperor-to-be were dead and there were no more obstacles. The next thing was to leave the endless sea. Jian Wushuang turned around slowly and looked at the void in the distance. At this moment, they did not notice that layers of ripples suddenly appeared in the void behind them. Then 2 figures walked out from it. In the next moment, the 2 figures suddenly shot up, and a vigorous silk directly wrapped around Di Qing and Immortal Lord Fuyao. Caught off guard, they were all hit. By the time Jian Wushuang reacted, the 2 figures had already dragged Di Qing and Fuyao and dashed forward. "You're courting death," Jian Wushuang shouted and instantly rushed forward, followed by Zhongli and Yan Fan. A total of 7 figures were chasing crazily under the sky that had become a void. When the 2 figures dragging Di Qing and Fuyao stopped, Jian Wushuang stopped as well. The sky was still broken, but in the middle of the broken sky, an almost completely broken heavenly gate came into view. This was the ruins of the third and fifth heaven, and also the place where Yu Yao killed her subordinate Yen immortals to become an emperor-to-be. Wu Shuang, long time no see. Suddenly, a voice came from the two figures that seemed to be shrouded in fog. Immediately after, the fog slowly dissipated, and the two figures were revealed. Jian Wushuang looked at the scene in astonishment. Those two figures were actually Bian Ziyuan and the young prince beside him. Their reappearance made Jian Wushuang feel a strange change in his mood. Bian Ziyuan's gaze was cold, and there was only cold-killing intent left in his gaze. The young prince stood with his hands behind his back, watching the scene with interest. Everyone is here. It looks like a good show will start soon. The young prince smiled strangely and stretched out his pale hands. As his palm moved, billions of tiny dust particles suddenly gathered in the void. Then, a figure condensed again. Black Cloud. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. Black Cloud, who had been completely obliterated, had actually revived. This was simply unimaginable. He slowly opened his eyes. At first, he was confused, but then he was overjoyed. I actually survived. Retracting his palm, the young prince's face turned even paler. He glanced at Black Cloud and said softly, "Don't be happy too early. Your enemy is right in front of you." Black Cloud was stunned and looked at Jian Wushuang subconsciously. He trembled and there was only fear in his eyes. He had not walked out of the terrible destruction. Now that he saw Jian Wushuang again, he almost could not even stand steadily. This Yen immortal who had killed him twice and extracted his emperor bone had become the most terrifying nightmare in his heart. The young prince who saw Black Cloud's expression could not help but reveal a look of disgust. Then he said coldly, "Your mission this time is to kill any grand Yen immortal you see. Otherwise, you should know what will happen to you." Hearing this, Black Cloud revealed a bitter expression. "Then I'll try my best." Ignoring him, the young prince looked at Bian Ziyuan and said, "Ziyuan, I'll leave them to you." "No, I only want him." Bian Ziyuan's voice was low as he raised his palm and pointed at Jian Wushuang. He nodded. "Let's begin then." The familiar chaotic aura spread out again. Although Black Cloud was scared out of his wits, he still chose to fight. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan also walked forward slowly. He only had eyes for Jian Wushuang. "Let them go, I'll fight you." Jian Wushuang said coldly, "Are you negotiating with me?" He smiled coldly. "Come and get it yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, an endless amount of exquisite mist rose up and instantly covered half of the void. Zhang Li and Yen Fan gritted their teeth. Although they were still at the peak of their cultivation realms, they could not use more than 10% of their power right now. Facing Black Cloud, they were completely powerless. At this moment, the Emperor's fate energy that Jian Wushuang carried had dissipated and his strength had weakened to a certain level. Without the Emperor's fate energy, he could only fight with a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal by using 3 streaks fate energy. Black Cloud had been scared out of his wits by Jian Wushuang, so he did not dare to move forward rashly. He only released his chaotic aura behind him as a distraction. This undoubtedly gave Jian Wushuang a chance to catch his breath. His immortal body was already exhausted to the extreme, but he still gritted his teeth and released the selfless True Shadow. With the addition of selfless True Shadow, Jian Wushuang forced himself to carry 3 streaks of fate energy. However, before he could channel the 3 streaks of fate energy, Bian Ziyuan had already charged over brazenly like a ghost. A fist was swung out heavily, as if millions of mountains and divine peaks were coming. Jian Wushuang was forced to resist, but he was suddenly knocked back 10,000 feet. He flew and plowed open a ravine in the void before he could barely stop himself. The blood in his immortal body churned. Bian Ziyuan's aura seemed to have changed. Jian Wushuang became serious. In the previous battle, Bian Ziyuan's cultivation realm was 6 revolutions, but he was killed by Jian Wushuang who had the 3 traces of fate energy. And now, the resurrected Bian Ziyuan gave him an extremely strange feeling. His cultivation realm was also hard to fathom for a moment. Zhongli and Yan Fan saw that Jian Wushuang was no match for them and were about to rush forward to help, but they were blocked by Black Cloud. "I'm very hungry," Black Cloud chuckled, his eyes filled with greed. On the ruins of the third and fifth heaven, under the broken heavenly gate, a huge battle erupted. The yen power from the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal caused the void to shatter even more violently, and fine cracks appeared on the heavenly gate above the void again. Waving his hand to block off all the ripples of energy, the pale and gloomy young prince turned to look at Di Qing and Fu Yao. "All of you are not bad. How about being my envoys? In return, I will bring you out of the endless sea." He smiled slightly, his eyes filled with a strange bewitchment. Di Qing was disgusted and looked at him coldly. As a prodigy who had walked out of the ancient era, he had his own pride. If Di Qing's fate energy had not dissipated, he would have given this unfathomable young prince a thunderous blow even if he had to die. "How about it?" the young prince asked faintly, as if he had them in his grasp. Di Qing looked at him coldly. Just as he was about to curse, Fu Yao suddenly said, "I agree." Di Qing was puzzled and looked at her in surprise. "I said, I'm willing." Fu Yao took a deep breath and said. He smiled. "Not bad, you know the situation very well. This is a wise move." Right after, Fu Yao said, "However, you have to agree to one condition of mine. Let this man go. I'm worth several times more than him." The young prince was startled when he heard that, and then he said with interest, "Several times more valuable? He is a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal while you are only 6 revolutions. How can you say that you are several times more valuable?" "Of course I'm several times more valuable. His fate energy has already been drained, so it'll probably take countless years for him to fully recover. My fate energy is abundant, and I can break through to a higher realm at any time. Not only that, I'm also the master of the sky and control hundreds of Grand Yen Immortals. So is my value several times that of his?" Fu Yao said solemnly, looking at him calmly. The young prince's brows were tightly knitted. He seemed to be moved by Fu Yao's words and turned to Di Qing to investigate carefully. Di Qing could no longer speak as he stared at her. "Indeed, your fate energy has already been sucked dry." The young prince sighed in pity and finally looked up at Fu Yao. You're not bad. I agree to the condition you mentioned." Fu Yao's body trembled slightly before her face turned pale. "All right." Without any hesitation, he waved his hand and removed the energy flowing around Di Qing. "Leave before I change my mind," the young prince said slowly. "You should thank this lady. Otherwise, I would never have let you leave alive." Di Qing was speechless. Fu Yao smiled for the last time before she regained her composure. "Hurry up and leave. Your companion seems to be unable to hold on any longer," he said slowly. Finally, Di Qing gritted his teeth and left. However, almost at the same time, the young prince threw a palm strike at his back. Boundless blue energy burst out and blasted Di Qing's back. "Di Qing," Fu Yao said in disbelief. She wanted to go and help but was held back by the young prince. "Nothing will happen to him. I didn't kill him. I just let him sleep." As his voice fell, a giant beast that was 1,000,000 feet in size suddenly jumped up from the deep endless sea. It had 9 heads that were like the sun. It raised its head and swallowed Di Qing before quickly hiding under the sea. Seeing this, the young prince's eyes flashed with satisfaction. There were ancient beasts that were not weaker than Grand Yen Immortals residing in the endless sea. They had the ability to penetrate the heavens and earth. They usually slept under the sea, and no one knew when they would wake up. Right now, Di Qing had been devoured by the ancient beast, which was the best situation for him. Above the ruins of the third and fifth heaven, under the broken heavenly gate, the fierce battle still continued. Bian Ziyuan suppressed Jian Wushuang so much that he could not even channel the 3 streaks of fate energy. The speed of their battle was even faster than the battle between Black Cloud against Zhongli and Yan Fan. Divine blood sprinkled into the void. Only the void was eternal. "You must not swallow him into your stomach." Under the boundless sea, it was deep and desolate, like the void of the universe, boundless. Among them, a giant beast shuttled through the deep sea. Its body surged with a strange color, isolating it from the corrosion of the seawater. On the largest head in the middle of its 9 heads, an old man in tattered linen clothes was lying on its head with his arms on its raised brow bones. The giant beast gave a human-like contemptuous smile, and its 9 sun-like heads opened their mouths at the same time. "Are you ordering me around?" The old man smiled bitterly. I wouldn't dare. I only said that this grand yen immortal is my benefactor's companion." The 9 heads of the giant beast snorted in unison. Then, the middle head raised itself and spat out a broken body. The old man hurriedly took it and let out a long breath. "I hate the smell on his body. It's very similar to one of my old enemies, but that enemy of mine has long died. I think he's not far from death," the giant beast said with some ridicule. "Oh no, it looks like he really can't take it." The old man's expression changed drastically because Di Qing's shattered immortal body could no longer circulate his energy properly. When the giant beast heard this, it said without the slightest bit of worry, "People like them won't die. I left a layer of dragon saliva on his body, so nothing will happen to him." Although it was called dragon saliva, it was actually a thick layer of transparent mucus that completely wrapped Di Qing within. The old man quickly calmed down because he realized that Di Qing's weak breathing was indeed slowly improving. He let out a long sigh. "In this way, our benefactor will have nothing to worry about." "You're right." The giant beast shuttled under the lonely, chaotic sea and said, "One of my heads was cut off by your benefactor." The old man's mouth twitched. "Is that so? My benefactor does have a bad temper." In the eternal void, endless yen power exploded, dyeing everything like an ancient battlefield. The 2 sword immortals, Zhang Li and Yen Fan, were already at the end of their rope. It was already unimaginable that they could last so long under Black Cloud's oppressive attacks without any fate energy. Although Black Cloud's Emperor Bone had been extracted by Jian Wushuang and he had died twice, his strength was still at its peak after he was resurrected. Without the restraint, he became the most terrifying existence on the entire battlefield. Under Bian Ziyuan's frenzied attacks, Jian Wushuang was forced to retreat. His immortal body, which had been almost emptied of the Emperor's fate energy, was suffering from side effects. He could not even freely use his yen power, and he could not even freely release his sword intent. "Aren't you very powerful? Bring out the aura that you have when you killed an emperor." There was only madness in Bian Ziyuan's eyes. He punched Jian Wushuang's chest again and again. "Why are you so weak now? If that's the case, then when you die by my hands, we'll be even." Bai Ziyuan shouted as he landed a strong punch on Jian Wushuang. The punch, which contained endless yen power, sent Jian Wushuang flying 1,000,000 feet away. He could not resist and could only let his immortal body fly backward. Boom! An extremely loud sound rang out as Jian Wushuang's immortal body smashed heavily on the heavenly gate. The cracks became finer and more numerous. At this moment, the young prince's eyebrows twitched. He knew that the heavenly gate that had been sealed for countless years had actually been shaken. His heart was beating like a drum. Cough, cough. Lowering his head and coughing out a mouthful of blood, Jian Wushuang's aura completely weakened and his chest caved in. His immortal body had been completely drained by the Emperor's fate energy, and he was no longer able to fight Bian Ziyuan. A dark and ruthless aura spread throughout the entire void. Bian Ziyuan rose into the air and arrived in front of him. At this moment, the endless exquisite mist was completely revealed. "Are you going to destroy your own fate energy? Or do you want me to do it?" Bian Ziyuan said with a sinister smile. Jian Wushuang raised his hand to wipe the divine blood from the corner of his mouth. His expression was still calm and emotionless. You can't do it." When he heard this, his expression instantly turned cold again. From the beginning to the end, Jian Wushuang had never acknowledged him. He had never even been a real opponent. A puny little yen immortal walked out from the white bone path under the blood river, sweeping away almost all his enemies, killing tens of times more opponents. This mighty attitude made Bian Ziyuan deeply fearful and jealous. The best way to resolve the fear and jealousy in the depths of one's heart was to destroy them at their roots. The exquisite mist had already become completely violent. Its power was enough to crush the heavenly Tao, and it started to fluctuate violently. Behind Bian Ziyuan, with the power of 10,000 heavens, a misty image materialized. Billions of clouds of water mist condensed, and the water mist image form grew to almost cover the entire void. It opened its true eyes. His true eyes were crimson red, filled with pure killing intent. Die! I will never forget you. Bian Ziyuan smiled strangely and then shook his arms. As his arms shook, the water mist image form opened its palms and smashed at Jian Wushuang. Therefore, under the broken heavenly gate, Jian Wushuang took the terrible damage with his body. With image form had the strength of a 6 revolutions grand Yen Immortal. Even his undying and imperishable immortal body could not withstand the attack. In addition, Jian Wushuang used the Emperor's fate energy twice. He was already weak. If it was not for his special characteristics, he would have died thousands of times. Rumble. At this moment, even the void trembled. Jian Wushuang, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, could not move at all. He could only bear the pain brought by each strike. His immortal body was fiercely embedded in the heavenly gate, while Bian Ziyuan controlled the water mist image form to bombard him with punches. Even the undying and imperishable immortal body had been completely shattered, and his immortal bones had turned into powder. If it weren't for the protection of the mystic garb of the 9 heavens, Jian Wushuang's immortal body would have been completely dismembered. As the punches became heavier and heavier, the cracks on the gate increased greatly, almost to the point of shattering. The young prince, who was watching from afar, felt his heart beat like a drum. He smelled an aura fluctuation that did not belong to the endless sea. That kind of aura fluctuation was an extremely ordinary aura before he was exiled to the endless sea. That was the outside world. Beyond the heavenly gate was the outside world. Quick, Ziyuan! Blast open the heavenly gate with all your might. The young prince was too excited, so his voice was hoarse. However, Bian Ziyuan, who only wanted to kill Jian Wushuang, did not hear any other sounds and just attacked with all his might. A sword slash quietly appeared behind him, swinging down with tremendous force. Clang! With the sound of the heavens and the earth, the metal trembled. An unparalleled sword slash cut off the right arm of the water mist image form and continued to slash at Bian Ziyuan. He had already gone crazy and did not care about the movement behind him. By the time he reacted, his entire right arm had been cut off. Ah! Bian Ziyuan was shocked and furious. He held his broken arm and turned around. Zhang Li held her sword with one hand. Her heroic eyes were extremely indifferent. If you touch him again, you will die without a burial place. A large amount of divine blood flowed out from his fingertip. Bian Ziyuan's eyes twitched. He realized that his severed right arm could not be healed at all. He slowly retreated. He knew Zhang Li was not simple. Seeing that Zhang Li had injured Bian Ziyuan, Yan Fan quickly rushed to help Jian Wushuang. However, Black Cloud would not let him act. After sending him flying with a slap, he went straight for Jian Wushuang. Black Cloud's eyes were filled with madness and greed. The Fate Energy, Emperor's Fate Energy, and Emperor Bone. Once he obtained them, he would definitely be able to ascend to the position of Emperor. At that time, who could stop him? His body turned into billions of chaotic auras and quickly wrapped around Jian Wushuang. Bian Ziyuan was furious, but he did not dare to say anything. No matter how weak Black Cloud was, he was still an emperor to be. Killing him was as easy as killing an ant. He swallowed the hatred in his heart and continued to confront Zhang Li. The heavenly gate was shattered and Black Cloud finally gathered in front of the heavenly gate. His greedy and crazy glance swept onto Jian Wushuang, who was embedded in the heavenly gate like a bloody man. He could clearly feel that Jian Wushuang's aura was extremely weak and he could no longer fight back. Black Cloud was greedy, and he needed no other reason. He opened his mouth and planned to swallow Jian Wushuang directly. However, in the next moment, 2 wisps of scarlet gold light shot out from the sunken heavenly gate. Jian Wushuang had already quietly opened his true eyes. Black Cloud was so frightened that he almost knelt in the air. His face was pale and his legs were trembling. "A small fry dares to fight for glory?" Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, his words filled with supreme authority. Black Cloud's face was pale as he slowly retreated. "My lord, I'll leave now and never oppose you again." "Get lost!" A deep and angry voice resounded. Black Cloud nodded and retreated. In the next moment, when he retreated to a certain distance, he suddenly smiled darkly. Then, he raised his arms, and a huge chaotic emperor's throne appeared, smashing heavily towards the heavenly gate. Boom! 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 The void trembled and the chaotic emperor's throne was embedded into the heavenly gate, destroying Jian Wushuang's body. Black Cloud laughed maniacally. He raised the chaotic emperor's throne and smashed it into the heavenly gate. The heavenly gate, which had been sealed for thousands of years, was now mending its cracks. At the same time, new cracks appeared, causing the heavenly gate to be on the verge of shattering. The young prince could no longer hide the palpitations in his heart. He roared with all his might. "When the heavenly gate opens, it's time to leave this endless sea." Black Cloud also smelled the unusual aura fluctuation, so he attacked the heavenly gate even more furiously. The heavenly gate shattered even more violently, as if it could completely open at any moment. But in the next moment, something happened. Black Cloud's expression suddenly froze. He realized that after the Chaos Emperor's throne was embedded in the heavenly gate, it could not move an inch further. Buzz! Billions of rays of light suddenly erupted and instantly shattered the Chaotic Emperor's throne. Along with the Chaotic Emperor's throne, the heavenly gate that had been sealed for thousands of years also shattered.